everybody, it's Romania Black. We're here. We're on episode 26 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. How'd we get here? It doesn't seem, I was looking the other day at when I started this show. I'm like, when did I start watching this show? And it was back in March of 2022, and it is September. So it's been a solid amount of months, right? And we're still not done. I want to say first and foremost, going into this final episode, we still have quite a bit of Neon Genesis content to cover because as I was planning out this month, because I'm a teacher, I plan out things way too much. But I was planning out like what Neon Genesis content we had left. And so we still have End of Evangelion. I'm going to be watching Death, the part of Death and Rebirth. I'm going to be watching the recap first. I mean, we talked about this on the Discord channel, but I think I'm going to sit down one morning, watch Death, and like get a nice recap and record that. I haven't decided if I'm going to post that separate from End of Evangelion. I may do that. I may just do like Death and have a recap and talk about it before we go to End of Evangelion. I haven't decided that fully yet, but I'm going to be watching that, then watching End of Evangelion, doing a discussion on that. There are scripts. So episode 24, apparently Bright Girl shared some links to scripts that were the original scripts. I want to react to those because that would be fun to see like what the original episode 24 scripts were supposed to be like. So that's going to be a video. There's a dating simulator, a Girlfriend of Steel 2. I've been told to play Girlfriend of Steel 2 because that's one where you can get Kaoru and Shinji, which is my ultimate goal. So I want to try to maybe do that. My very first foray into Let's Play is going to be a dating simulator for Neon Genesis. Why not? So I want to do a video about that. And that may even be multiple videos depending on how long it takes me. And then I want to kind of react to the manga now and talk about the manga. So that's going to be, there's 14 volumes. So I don't know if I'm going to do like 14 weeks worth or like 7 weeks and just do 2 volumes at a time. I don't know yet. But there's going to be that. Then there's all the rebuild movies. There's 3 rebuilds and Thrice Upon a Time. Long story short, even though this is the last episode of the original series, there is still a lot more Neon Genesis. So basically, just plan for the rest of 2022 to be Neon Genesis. At this point, there's just going to be Neon Genesis for the rest of 2022. Just plan on that. That's all we can do at this point. But I'm so excited because I love this series. I love watching and talking about it with you all. It's one of those series where you can really dive down a rabbit hole and go into all sorts of things with it. And there's so much history with it, so much behind the scenes of how it's been made, lots of things. So you can really get involved with this series and dive deeper than a lot of other series with it. And I love that about it. So looking at that today, I was like planning out stuff for the next month of reactions. I'm like, oh, I've got a lot of Neon Genesis left. So even though this is the last episode of the original series, we still got a long way to go before we are done with this series. A long way. So I am excited about that. But I've got some notes, surprising no one, from episodes 24 and 25 that I want to talk about before we dive into this. First and foremost, I do want to say that, and I've made a note about it, that the Shinji rant video, I've got it pulled up, ready to go. So at the end of this, I've been recommended the Shinji's rant video. I've been recommended to watch it. Apparently it's the English dub voice actor for Shinji, and at the end of episode 26 in the commentary, he did like a 1-minute rant about it, whatever that entails. So when we get done with episode 26, I'm going to pull that up before we start the discussion and give us a good little laugh before we go into the discussion, right? Because I have a feeling that this series is not going to end on a happily ever after note. I get that vibe. I get that vibe that we're not going to end on a good note. And I'll talk more about that with the comments, but let's get into these before we start this intro. Of course it's going to be long. You all know to expect that. Nicholas B. talked about how the DVD, that in the DVD release of this, episodes 24 through 26, had Revelations 3:5 on the back of it. I'm like, how ominous. Like, you just go into this, you pick up the DVD, and you're like, Revelations, huh? Like, that's the scariest part of the Bible, and that's what we're going to put on the back of the DVD cover for episodes 24 through 26. Fitting. But Bright Girl noted what Revelations 3:5 actually entails, saying, "He who overcomes shall be clothed in white garments, and I will not blot out his name from the book of light, but I will confess his name before my Father and his angels." And I was like, oh! So, yeah! So is Shinji going to be clothed in white? Is his name getting blotted out of the book of life? Is it staying in there? Is Shinji going to save the day? Is he going to destroy all of humanity? We don't know, but that was interesting. I was like, fitting. Fitting. Good marketing there. Jack Kim noted in episode 21 that it was mentioned that Adam released anti-AT energy. Knowing that the AT field is putting up a barrier between your heart and the rest of the world, what does that mean? And I was like, So anti-AT energy would be if the AT field is setting up a wall to protect the heart, the anti-AT energy would be opening that up. So is that kind of related to Gendo's plan and making everybody into primordial soup? Is that he's using Adam to be a catalyst for that? Because if Adam can release anti-AT energy field, which would kind of make sense because Kaoru's whole deal is that Kaoru was very much like, he had an AT field, but his whole persona, his whole agenda was that he was kind of a representation of just being uninhibited and just opening his heart up to everyone. And he's the son of Adam. So it would make sense if Gendo wanted the Lance of Longinus gone so he could utilize Adam to his fullest potential, if he wanted to use Adam and Rei together somehow to be a catalyst to like make it to where everybody's hearts opened up and they all became primordial soup together. Maybe that has something to do with it. We can talk about it after the episode and see if we get anything with that in the episode for this week. But I thought that was interesting. I'm like, okay, it makes sense. The angels are kind of the opposite of humanity. So that makes sense. We'll see where that goes, Jack. But I'm glad you brought that up. Bernard Black talked about Donna Haraway and their Cyborg Manifesto, which I've actually heard of Cyborg Manifesto, but I've not really read into it, but I've heard about it before in one of my graduate classes. But it's talking about gender through a philosophical sci-fi lens, which fits very well with Neon Genesis, because this entire series, we've had Shinji, who has had like this archetype, and he's kind of subverted the male protagonist archetype because he's done a lot of things that kind of go against that gender norm. And so it's interesting that, as Bernard points out, you have a boy pilot sitting inside an Eva body, Eva automatically being feminine in name alone, but possibly having like a female consciousness if we think that Yui's inside of there. And then there's this idea of fluidity and gender and sex that this series has explored. So yeah, Cyborg Manifesto seems like it could be an apt thing to apply to this series and go into more detail. And I'm sure somebody on YouTube has like taken the Cyborg Manifesto and done a whole analysis of Neon Genesis with it. And as soon as I'm done with this entire series, movies and all, I'm probably going to be doing some deep dives into it. I want to do kind of like a recap video for Neon Genesis like I've done with Attack on Titan, but I don't want to do that until, one, I finished the entire series, the manga, everything. And two, I probably want to spend some time afterwards like looking at analysis videos and applying those as well. So it's going to be a long time before I get to that recap video, but it's something that's like sitting in my brain right now, being like, it'll come eventually. But I think that would be cool to like look that up later. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Bernard. Dark Warwolf talked about, is it Eva awakening? Like back in the episode where Ritsuko was like, oh, she's awakened. Is it Eva or is it Lilith? And I don't know. There's been some talks in the comments about Lilith, and I'm kind of like, I kind of zone it out because I don't want to be spoiled. And it's know that it's in the back of my brain, but all we know about Lilith at this point is that she supposedly is the one creating man, and Adam's the one creating the angels. That's all we really know based on the context of the series so far. So any talk of Lilith, I'm kind of like pushing it to the side because I'm like, that seems like it could be spoiler territory, could be going into the movies and such, so I'm gonna wait, and then maybe after End of Evangelion we can tie more into Lilith. But that is interesting, like with, you know, I'm not sure how that all plays out, we're gonna see. And then Dark Warwolf is the one that told me about Shinji's rant, which I've got pulled up to watch later. Andy Astrand, however these names work as far as handles go, talked about how I really liked this, that Asuka, you know, we have the metaphor of the door shutting and opening with Asuka, that the door keeps opening up for Asuka and that leads to her trauma of seeing her mother committing suicide. Andy Astrand pointed out that throughout this series, and I really didn't notice it until you pointed it out, Asuka has shut the door on many people. And I was like, that's such a interesting connection between her shutting the door on people in her life and then that comparing to when she opens the door, she sees this traumatic event. So maybe it's part of Asuka's like psychological defense mechanism that she keeps people out because she knows what happens when you open up that door, what you can see on the other side, and she doesn't want to go there. So she constantly shuts the door from people getting too close to her so she can't, like Kaoru said, become hurt. I thought that was really awesome. So I'm glad you pointed that out. There's a big discussion from Rima Mary, Penta, Simone, Azienda, and NL. You all talked about in episode 24 the conversation, the relationship between Ikuhara, Shinichi, and Anno. And I want to take a little moment to talk about this because, like, I honestly, it moved me. And so Ikuhara Shinichi is the director of Revolutionary Girl Utena, which I've had a lot of people recommend. Like, as I've watched this series, they've been like, are you going to watch Revolutionary Girl? I actually had Revolutionary Girl Utena on the poll with this show, and it lost out to this show. So I definitely want to do retro polls in the future, or a retro selection, and it's going to be on there as an option. So just so y'all know, I do want to get to Utena eventually, especially after watching this show, and especially after these comments. I want to get to that series eventually, so it's going to be on there. So there's that. But has directed that series, Yuri Kuma Arashi, Sarazanmai, which is a pretty relatively recent anime, and they're all like queer anime. So I thought that was kind of cool tying to Kaoru, which the comments talked about that Anno, who was in a dark place making this series. Yeah, Anno's been in a pretty dark place making this series. And supposedly talked to Ikuhara at a bathhouse, which we'll go into more detail in a minute, at a hot spring, and got advice from him, and Ikuhara helped him through his depression. And so there's a connection to Ikuhara and Kaoru as a character that a lot of people think that Kaoru is based off Ikuhara and his connection to Anno. Ikuhara, and it's kind of hinted at that Ikuhara Anno wanted him to become part of the Neon Genesis team, and he kept denying him, being like, nah, I got other stuff I'm working on. He was a big part of Sailor Moon, and so Anno, who was a big fan of his work, tried to like get him to join the Neon Genesis team. He was denied, but he kept trying to convince him. He hired Sailor Moon's VA to play Masato. He named a character Rei, which apparently Rei, who is Sailor Mars, is Ikuhara's favorite character from Sailor Moon. So there's that. And the influence can be seen throughout his production, Neon Genesis. But apparently the story is that Toei Animation, who did Sailor Moon, hosted after a rap party or something, they hosted a retreat where they went to a hot spring, and Anno, who is a freelance animator for Sailor Moon, which I thought was really cool, who did freelance work for Sailor Moon's production, he ended up going on the hot spring trip with Ikuhara, and there was supposedly a night where the two of them stayed up in the hot spring talking to one another after everyone went to sleep, kind of like Kaoru and Shinji. And said that during this, they kind of opened up to each other and started talking about both of them having like moments in their life that were dark and depressing. And so Ikuhara opened up about his own depression, saying that he kind of like was talking about like Japanese standards and about being a failure, and that he was worried like he wouldn't make anything out of his life. And he ended up coming out of that depression and ended up, making something of himself and finding something that gave him happiness. But Anno kind of opened up and they had this deep conversation about it. And I started tearing up reading this comment. I think, NL, it was your comment. I was like tearing up and crying reading this because it talks about how Anno, he credits 3 people for saving his life, like from depression. And I was like, oh my God. And it was Hayao Miyazaki, which one of the most amazing animators in existence, Hayao Miyazaki, Ikuhara himself, I think his name is Kunichu, and then his wife, Miyoko Anno. And I was like, his wife, his best friend, an influence, and then Hayao Miyazaki. And I was like tearing up because I've known people that have like friends and family that have like suffered from depression or committed suicide. And it's a really deep and personal thing for me. And so I'm like, oh, like it just gutted me. And I'm going to try not to get emotional right now about it. But in an interview, Ikuhara confirmed that the bath scene did happen. Although he says he laughs about it. He's like, there was no love confession. And I was like, haha. Which, so they say. No, I don't think so. But that his message to Anno was about that it was okay to be fine with the way that you are. And I was like, oh, that's like so perfect. That like you are fine just the way you are. You don't have to live up to anybody's expectations. And I love that. And so decades later, in another interview, Anno says that the top of his bucket list is still to work on a project with Ikuhara. I was like, get these two together and let them do something, please. It's like, please let them work. Even if it's like a one-shot, even if it's like a mini-series, even if it's like an OVA, like let them work on something together, because that just like my heart, it touched me. I was like, oh my God. And you can tell, like, in the bath scene with Kaoru and Shinji, even if you don't take it romantically, which I think the Anno intends for it to be romantic, but even if you don't take it that way, it's clear that Shinji draws, like, he gets inspired by and motivated by Kaoru and what he tells him. And just the idea that that's based off of Anno finding real life inspiration from a friend touched my heart. I was like, oh my gosh. Got me. It got me in the feels. So all your comments, I was just sitting there like tearing up, and I actually cried on Anel's comment reading, and I was like, I'm glad that I'm not recording this. It was great. So anyway, Enel also adds to that Kaoru was meant to show up earlier in the series, like around episode 14 or 16, but apparently due to a story change around episode 13, it was delayed, and Anno regrets that. But, and I figured once we get done with the entire, once we get done with End of Evangelion, we can talk about that script change and things like that. But in all honesty, it's kind of like, it's bittersweet and a double-edged sword, but while it sucks that Kaoru was only in that one episode, he left such an impact. And I wonder if he had been in the series prior, if it would have had such an impact and if he would have been as popular. Now, obviously, we can argue that, yeah, he would have been. But there's just something about characters that come in for that brief period of time and they just swoop in, steal the show, leave an impact, and then they change the entire message of the story and make it so much more important that you almost wonder, you're like, well, if they'd been in there, would it have spoiled it? If they'd been in there longer, would it have spoiled the impact or not made it as, special? And so I don't know. I kind of like that Kaoru comes in the final hour and it's like, I'm here, time for things to get weird after I go, and then he's gone. So I don't know. I kind of like that he's in that one episode, but then like the greedy part of me is like, no, I wish he was in the whole thing. so I definitely understand Anno's regret, right? David Garcia notes that Gendo and Rei at the end of episode 24 mirrors them at the end of episode 16. Funny that. I think that's an interesting parallel. And then Bright Girl, we were talking in the Discord about this, and she shared like some video clip comparison, but apparently I don't watch the previews for the next episode of this series, not usually, because I don't want to be spoiled, because sometimes previews are ambiguous and sometimes they give a lot away, and I didn't want to risk it. I have gone back and watched a few previews like after the fact, just because people have recommended me go see them, like the one where Masato, to like show that Masato's like, be ready for more fan service next time, haha, and then it's usually juxtaposed with a really terrible and despairing scene. Like, I've gone back and rewatched those, but I haven't watched any of the previews from like, I think the last preview I watched was from like episode 16, so I haven't watched any previews since then. But Bright Girl noted that episodes 23 and 26, they were so crunched on time, so behind schedule, that the previews were just literally storyboards. They were storyboards and layered text bubbles and paper, and that was it. And I was like, are you joking? But no, it's literally just, I went back and watched the preview. She showed the preview for like episode 24. It's just like storyboard sketches and just things cobbled together. And for one, I figure as a viewer watching this being like, wow, they don't have their shit together at all. Like, that would be my first thought. But the other thing is, I kind of like it. I really like it, and especially watching the comparison. I almost wish that series would do that. They'd show you like the rough sketch storyboard previews, so you can kind of see behind the scenes like what it's gonna look like, what it's planned out, and then when you watch the actual episode, you see the end product. Like, that would be really cool. I almost wish more series did that, even though I'm sure it's not hype or anything, but I think that's kind of cool. And I like that. I've always liked watching, like with Disney movies when I grew up, I'd watch on the DVDs, like the behind the scenes clips to see them like storyboard and go through it, because I think that's such a fascinating process. So I thought that was really cool. So thank you, Bright Girl, for sharing that. That was really awesome. And then Alex Cornejo talks about an ode to joy, that we kind of make fun of it because it's like such a almost cliche song to play. However, Alex Cornejo notes that the lyrics to Ode to Joy, which I honestly had not read the lyrics to Ode to Joy until he put them in the comments for episode 24, talk about the day that humanity will be able to set aside its differences and join as one in jubilation with no more pain and death. And I was like, oh shit, well, maybe Gendo's like, see, Shinji, your boyfriend, he played Ode to Joy all the time. I'm just trying to enact the plan that he put out there. And I was like, oh God, no! Because I'm not for Gendo's solidarity plan. I am not for it at all. And I'll talk about why later on. But I thought it's kind of haunting and creepy that the Ode to Joy lyrics kind of not only connect to Gendo's plan, but talk about Kaoru's whole message about being yourself, and then connect that whole behind the scenes stuff with Anno and Ikuhara. And I was like, oh, fun times. Lyndon Price notes how Anno and the studio, they were just done by episode 26. They were out of time, out of money, and just, they could not meet their deadlines, and things were just rushed. And they were receiving death threats. I'm like, that's the one thing. And several animators and creators and mangaka, like I know Isayama's received death threats apparently for like the end of his series. I'm like, one, it's a fictional series. Is it really worth a death threat? No. Was I horribly disappointed by the end of Game of Thrones? Yes. Did I invest like 6 years of my life into that series and end terribly? Yes. Am I gonna write a death threat to the creators? No. Because it's a piece of media. I've moved on. So there's that. So I kind of think the whole idea of a death threat for a piece of media is stupid, but that's also really sad because Anno was like not only in a terrible place at the time, but there's some things that were kind of beyond his control, and for him to receive death threats on top of it, imagine what that would do to your psyche. Like, you're already depressed and not happy with how things are ending with this passion project you've worked so hard on, but then you receive death threats from people that are disappointed in you. No wonder this series is the way that it is, right? So anyway, I thought that was interesting to note. Yara Kure, I hope I pronounced that right. Yara Kure noted how Shinji and Gendo are kind of mirrors of each other, which I do see that in the series. And they talked about how both of them run away. Both of them can be destructive in their own ways, especially if things don't go their way. And we've seen that with Shinji. We've seen that with Gendo. And that Surumaki Kazuya, who is assistant director of Neon Genesis, noted how Shinji is not cowardly or indecisive. He's obstinate and doesn't pay mind to other people. And thinking about it, yeah, we give Shinji a hard time because we think that he runs away but his running away is not necessarily cowardly. It's just that he's obstinate. He's just kind of has that wall there. He's like, no, I don't want to do, he's stubborn, right? And stubborn and cowardice are not the same thing. Right? So that was interesting to note. And then Anno admits that he's kind of like Gendo in a way, which I'm like, no wonder you're depressed if you think you're like Gendo. But also, Yara noted that's why he gets all the women in the series. I was like, womp womp. I was like, oh God, no. How does his wife think about that? I'm sure she's fine. But Alex Cornejo also talks about how, I really liked this, that Alex Cornejo in episode 25, one of my favorite things in episode 25 is the image of Masato and her face as a child, and it's slowly getting cut up and taped back together, like a photograph ripped up and taped back together. And Alex Cornejo said that that image parallels the letter that Shinji wrote to Gendo that he tore up and then put back together. And I was like, yes! Especially with our comparisons of Shinji and Masato. That was a really great observation. I loved that. Christopher Peterson talked about how, and this is kind of what I wanted to get back to, that episode 25 is a lot more tolerable, he said, once you know that there's more content to watch. And I do agree with that. I think one of the reasons why episode 25, as bizarre as it was and how crazy it was, I didn't feel disappointed by it because I knew, one, that at this point, what do you expect? Right? At this point, you're like, no, we've been in some crazy stuff. I'm not surprised. I don't know if anything can surprise me at this point about Neon Genesis. I say that going into episode 26 in the End of Evangelion. But I think there's that. But I think also what makes it a lot more palatable for me, and I replied in that comment about this, is that knowing that, yeah, episode 25 is the most bizarre penultimate episode of a series that subverts everything you're expecting going into it. But I think I was okay with it because I knew that there was still another episode and that there was still all that content left to look at. So I was like, well, there's all these things I don't have answered and that don't seem to match up yet, but there's still End of Evangelion. There's still the Rebuild movies. There's still all this content, right? So I do agree with Christopher that I think if you didn't know that there was going to be End of Evangelion, you didn't know all this other content would be existing, yeah, I could see why episode 25 would be like a slap to the face, because you're like, this is not what I expected. What do we do in this final episode? How do we wrap all this up? We're not getting a happy ending, are we? And so I could see how people would be like feeling jarred by it, because I think at the time, somebody in Discord noted that I think there was a month after episode 26 before they announced the End of Evangelion. Could you imagine you'd watch this show and then after episode 26 ended, you're like, that's it? And then had to wait 4 weeks before he found out anything else? And someone else in the Discord noted that I guess episode 26 had like the highest ratings of viewership for the whole series, which of course it's the final episode. Usually the final episode of anything gets insane views because it's the last episode. People want to see how it's gonna end. So yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot of expectation writing on that. And so I'm gonna try to go into this episode tempering my expectations, being like, okay, I know End of Evangelion's coming after this. I know there's more movies. However this show ends, we'll just see, right? And so kind of going in with, I don't want to go in with that hyped expectation. And I'm glad that those of you in the comments and on the Discord have not made me feel hyped, because you're like, oh, just wait. And that's all you've said. And I'm like, I'm glad for that, because it makes me feel like I'm not going in being like, this is going to be the best episode ever. No, considering how Anno and the state of his mental and mental state and like the deadlines and everything, I'm going to go in with very tempered expectations and see what happens. But then also this entire episode 25, is a mix of unreliable narration. And I told Christopher this in the comment. I'm like, yeah, I like an unreliable narrator in a story because I think they add a lot to the story and make it really dynamic and interesting. But it's like Anno was like, what if the whole thing could have possibly been an unreliable narration? And I'm like, you gotta tone it down, Anno. I love that though. I love the idea that there's so much, because we're looking at the episode through Shinji's perspective. In the episode, I kept wondering if we were going into other characters' perspectives, but no, they're all in this primordial soup. So it could be just from Shinji's perspective, and we're just seeing how he views Masato and Asuka and Rei from his own perspective, and he could be projecting himself into their own thoughts. You just don't know. There's no concrete evidence of whose perspective we're truly getting. We know Shinji's in there. We know most of it's Shinji's, but we don't know for certain if Masato and Rei and Asuka are actually talking for themselves, or if it's Shinji just working through it, or if they're all in a primordial soup as one collective together already. We don't know for sure. And that unreliability with the narration makes things very jarring, very confusing, very like abstract, and it can be frustrating. So I agree. I also agree with Christopher Peterson that I'm not on board with Gendo's plan. There's just something about the idea of being in a collective soup bowl and no one has their own identity or sense of self. They're all just one big entity. Not for that. Personally, not a fan. Like, for reasons, right? But then finally, and I know I've talked for like nearly 30 minutes, but what did you all expect at this point? Bright Girl talks about the concept of a play within the play. That Anno is very aware of this, and she shared some interview excerpts, which I thought was really cool. But that Anno understands that this is a play within a play, and said that it's really Shinji looking at the surface of strangers and their pasts, and the idea that as you get close to someone, you start to see them in their entirety, both their positive and their negative traits. And that kind of relates back to what Kaoru was saying in episode 24. He's like, yeah, if you get close to someone, it's a gamble. It's a risk. You may get betrayed. You may get hurt. And so I feel like episode 25 is a direct response to that with Kaoru, that you have Shinji realizing in all these relationships with Asuka, with Rei, and with Masato, yeah, he's gotten to know them. And as he's gotten to know them more, he's learned things about them that are negative, that could be embarrassing, that could change the way he perceives them. And it's like, do you accept them in their entirety? Do you accept these people for their good and their bad? And I think a lot of these characters are afraid of showing that fullness of themselves to others because they're afraid they won't get accepted, that they'll be abandoned, or that they'll be seen as disgusting, or they'll be seen as unworthy, right? And a lot of these characters had experiences with people in the past where that exact same thing happened, and they don't want it repeated with Shinji. So I think that's really interesting. It also kind of ties to the fact that, yeah, can Shinji accept Gendo? That's been a big question throughout the series. Rei's asked this question a lot. Can you accept your father? Did you try to understand him? Can you accept Gendo for who he is? I don't think Shinji can at this point, which is curious because this whole series is questioning whether Shinji can accept like Masato and Asuka and Rei for who they are in their entirety. But then when it comes to Gendo, it's possibly a different story. So I don't know. But also, Bright Girl's comment talked about how Freud's theory of the good mother and bad mother. When you see the good and bad in a person, it creates the concept of a stranger because you think you know somebody, but then when you see them in their entirety, you're like, I really didn't know you at all. And that's so true with Masato especially. She in the last episode was like, I don't want Shinji to see this entire view of me because he'll judge me and it'll change his perception of me. So yeah, that's all the comments. Probably gonna do another table of contents for this video because we're like 30 minutes in. But so yeah, I do not go into this episode thinking that we're gonna get a happily ever after ending. I don't even know if we're gonna get an ending. I feel like End of Evangelion is going to be the true ending of the story. I feel like this is just gonna be like, there's this, and then it's going to end, and we're going to have to watch End of Evangelion to get the true ending of the series. I feel like that's how it's going to shake out. That's just my thoughts. So I'm going into this episode not expecting a full-blown conclusion. We'll see. But yeah. But I am excited to watch it with y'all, and I can't believe we're already episode 26. But like I said, we still have so much Neon Genesis to go that it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to be great. So let's not waste any more time, shall we? Yeah, let's not waste any more time. We are going to start Neon Genesis Evangelion episode 26, baby. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. To collect myself. You can't really tell, but I have sweat through this entire shirt. I was going to record some other reactions today in this shirt. No, it's not happening after this. I'm going to switch it out with something else. But oh my God. I laughed so hard at the ending of that because, one, that is not the ending I thought we would have for this at all. At all. No questions were answered. As far as the plot goes, none. Now, as far as the psychological elements of this show, we dived into all of it. Shinji, he made it out fine. But we don't get any resolution. None. Like, is he gonna escape the primordial soup? Is he just gonna be fine in the primordial soup and he's gonna live in this state of this illusion of everybody's happy for him and he's just gonna like accept his fate in the primordial soup and that's where we've ended it? We don't know. Nope. We won't know till end of Evangelion. But just, I was in my head sitting there going, if you watched, I will say this for Neon Genesis, time has been its biggest friend, which is such an ironic connection to this whole story because the whole idea is that it just takes time for you to understand and accept yourself. And by the end of this episode, it just took time and reflection for Shinji to understand these little truths that he came to know by the end of it. I don't know where to start with this episode at all, but I will say time has been Neon Genesis' biggest friend because not only has time allowed for all this other content about the series to come out, for Anno to flesh out the series further, and for him to explore, I guess, to flesh out the maybe, I don't even know what to expect out of End of Evangelion. I have no clue. At this point, no idea. None. I'm like, if this is how the main series ended, the only thing I can hope with End of Evangelion is that it gives some answers to the plot to what the fuck happened. Because we didn't get any answers. None. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm broke. White Boy Coon, you're gonna have to help me this one because this episode broke me. I am trying not to laugh, but I'm so floored because if you sat through 26 weeks of this series and you got to the end and episode 25 happened and you were like, okay, all right, well, I'm feeling a little nervous, but it's okay. I'm sure Anno has answers. I'm sure we'll find out all these questions and what's happening. And then this episode went, screw you. Anno is just like, you know what? Screw all of you. I've got some personal stuff I need to sort through. And that's what this episode is going to be about, is me sorting through some things. And for Anno's sake, I'm glad. Like I said, time has been this series' biggest friend. I'm glad Anno was able to sort through his depression, sort through the bad things happening in his life. And if he had to use this series and Shinji as a platform and a way to do it, more power to him. More power to him to sort out through this stuff in his life and come to these conclusions. But damn, if you thought this was the end and nothing was answered, I would have been... Here's the thing. I talked about Game of Thrones at the beginning of the series. If you've ever watched Game of Thrones, the books are unfinished, by the way. The books, Song of Ice and Fire, the books for Game of Thrones are not finished yet. George R.R. Martin is still swimming. He's like Anno. He's just trying to figure it all out. And so they're not finished. But the series kind of ended with... It's weird. It's a weird comparison because on the one hand, Game of Thrones ended because the creators were just done and ready to move on to their next project. And so they just kind of abandoned it and just gave up on it. And so some of the plot lines in that series, without spoiling anything, it's not that they don't get resolved. The resolution just sucks. And it's not consistent with the character. It's not consistent with the world building that built up all those seasons. It's just there's a lot of problems with it. With this, it's not that things aren't consistent. They are. It's just that all the questions you still have that aren't answered, Anno doesn't even glance at them. He's like, oh, that's not important. This series is all about looking into, and maybe that's the point. This series is all about a psychological introspection into Shinji's mind and helping Shinji to come to these conclusions himself. But the OP, the become a legend boy, like, I guess this series is made him out to be that, but oh my god. I am glad, first and foremost, I am so glad that fake ending where things were right as rain, I'm glad that was not the ending of this series, because if it was, I was gonna be like, no. As soon as that started happening, I was like, are you shitting me? If we're gonna end with a hard cut to an alternate reality, or it was all a dream, I was about to come unglued because I was like, is this what everybody's talking about? But the moment they went back to the stage, I was like, oh, thank God. I was like, okay, thank God that we were going back to this. This was all just a possibility. They touched on the AU angle of it. That I'm like, okay, good. But then the clapping at the end, we'll get to it. Oh, God. If you had told me the plot of this episode when I first started this series, wouldn't have believed you. Would have been like, that's a funny joke. I actually really like this episode. Don't get me wrong. I actually really like this episode because it's Shinji finally coming to some conclusions and things that we've wanted as the audience for him to realize this whole series. And there's so much this episode talks about that I'm like, yes, touch base on this. Yes, we've milled our way through all this psychological angle throughout this entire series. So yes, finally get to these parts that are relevant. Thank you. And letting these characters get to these conclusions that we have wanted them to get to. So yes, I am all aboard that. But God, the questions unanswered. The plot, Gendo, angels, Adam, Lilith, who cares? Anno's like, you're not here for that bullshit, right? You just want to make sure Shinji gets it out fine, right? I loved this episode, but damn it does not give you answers. It's a psychological introspection, and holy shit. I don't know how long this is going to be. I've already wasted 8 minutes trying to put myself together for this, but God. Okay. Where do we go to? Where do we start? Okay, in the corner, we're going to put questions for End of Evangelion. In an hour and 30. Okay, guys, now you don't answer this question, but if End of Evangelion answers none of these questions and it's just an hour and a half of Anno going on a psychological mind trip, I'll know. I don't know. Maybe the rebuilds will answer. So that's what I'm going to put. I'm going to put questions for End of Evangelion and the rebuilds. We're just gonna do that. Questions for those. We're gonna just put a little question mark. Questions that have not been answered. If they're never answered, I guess we'll talk about it at the end of the series. It's fine. But yeah, so the killer of Kaji, Ritsuko, and Masato. Who shot them? When did it happen? Why was Ritsuko in LCL fluid? Why was Masato in a hangar and not with Ritsuko? Why was Kaji in front of a fan? Who shot them? Will we ever find out? I don't know. I'd like to find out, but will Anno tell us that? Don't know. Again, this episode is very Twin Peaks. I have one of my really good friends is like the biggest Twin Peaks fan, and I want to recommend this series to them so much. They're not an anime watcher. They've never watched anime before, and I want to tell them just to watch this series and be like, go watch this series for Mind Trip. Just do it. Just do it. But I really want to recommend this series to them, especially now after this episode, because the end of this episode was like total Twin Peaks, and I was like, that's why I was just like, okay, we're going to go with it. All right, fine. I'm here for it. So yeah, Fuyu-chan, his role, is he against Gendo at the end? I honestly thought that by the end of this, we'd have like Fuyu-chan like trying to like, I thought we were either going to get Fuyu-chan like going up against Gendo and like telling him off, or Gendo killing Fuyu-chan, him becoming part of the primordial soup. I thought we were going to get something with that. I thought we were going to get some kind of explanation with Masato and Ritsuko. I thought we were going to get answers. Nope. Not like you think you're going to. Ray's role alongside Adam. Like that. Are we going to get any more with that? The explanation with Lilith. Going to get any more with that? Gendo and the specimen in his hand. Gonna get any more of that? Don't know. Any more of that? The whole instrumentality. I guess by the end of this, it does it end with that or not? Because by the end of the series, I thought it was setting up for us being like, okay, no, Shinji realizes himself. He realizes he wants to stay in this world. He wants to still exist in this world. He gets congratulated by everybody being like, you did it. It was very much Spirited Away where Chihiro answers the question right and all the people are like, you did it. Like, it felt like that. I'm like, was Hayao Miyazaki inspired by this ending? I was like, okay, cool. Like, it feels like that. But the thing about Spirited Away is that there's a resolution after that. The movie doesn't just end with that scene. There are things that happen afterwards. And you're like, okay, and it's kind of bittersweet, but you're like, okay. And so I thought, okay, cool. He's got the recognition that he wants. I thought he was gonna, like, the moment the stage started breaking up, I was like, he's gonna burst out of this world like he did with Masato crying over him. He's gonna burst out naked and just be like, fuck you, Gendo, and like go after him and do whatever he needs to do. But no, we don't get that. It doesn't give us the aftermath. It's just like, okay, Shinji, you did it. You solved your existential crisis, and then we're left with, well, now what? And I'm guessing End of Evangelion is hopefully going to answer that question. But I'm so floored that that's just where it ends. Now, we're going to go through this episode. And one thing that is abundantly clear is that they had no time. They were out of time. There's parts where there's just like, he just got a Copic marker out and the thing was like, I'm going to sketch Ray real quick and we're going to add some dialogue that we pre-recorded in the ADR studio and we're just going to put it on there and call it a day. When they had all the animation of the kids in the alternate reality and then it switches back to just drawings, I'm like, they ran out of time. And I was like, holy shit. I've never watched a show that's been so blatantly unfinished. like so blatantly unfinished. Like I've seen, this is not really spoilers for Haikyuu, but during COVID, Haikyuu, the fourth season was getting animated, and during COVID they had like a lot of issues with, I mean, during the height of COVID, they had a lot of issues with the animation studio, so they had to farm out some animation to another studio. And the joke is you can tell. And yeah, there are some episodes that, yes, when the original run was happening, you could tell that this animation was farmed out to an alternate studio. It was rushed. It's not good, but it was completed. It was done. Like, you could make fun of it because it was done. But in this, it's like, oh shit, no, they ran out of time and budget and just were like, just do it. And there's parts where there's photographs, because I'm like, Anno's like, I took a photo of a bin full of cans. We're going to talk about it. But the funny thing about this series, and again, time is its best friend, is that by this point, you can almost view it as like art house. You can almost view it as experimental, as you can view it as it was an artistic decision. And the answer is no, they ran out of time and budget. But it's funny because the series is so psychological, and because it's so abstract, and because Anno's like, fuck it, you can almost look at it as him being like, oh no, this was, like, I could see somebody that didn't know the behind the scenes, that didn't know the story about the studio and its budget and how the timelines and everything was being so rushed, and how like chaotic and insane it was during this time for the studio. If you didn't know any of that, I could just see somebody being like, no, that was Anno's artistic decision to represent this psychological aspect. Like I could just see it. I could just see somebody saying that. And it's believable. It's believable with this series. It is. But then when you know the behind the scenes and you're like, oh shit, no, they just ran out of time and budget. It's funny, you can look at that in a dual way, and there's an endearing quality to it. Like and again, that's time, right? I can look back on the series and be like, wow, in the day, this is what was happening with it. It's so endearing to me now. But if you were watching this for the first time, and you were an audience member in the 90s, and I can't wait to hear in the comments, those of you that watched this when it first came out, I can imagine you being like, the fudge? What? Like, I'm so floored by it. I'm so floored by this episode. Like, it's been hinted at in the past when they've had trouble, and you could tell that they reused animation, or they used the black screen with the dialogue. Like, it's been hinted at that that's been a problem with this series, like, going in throughout it. But when it get to this episode, and it's like, oh no, they just ran out of time, and this is what we could do. I give Anno applause for just doing it. For just, I will give a creator. Here's the thing, again, with the difference between Game of Thrones and this series. Game of Thrones, the creators gave up. And they've said in interviews they were just ready to move on. They abandoned the project and they gave up. And that pisses me off. Because I'm like, it's not a matter of, with Anno, I feel like this was his passion project and he wanted to see it through. And he's like, we'll do whatever we can to finish it. Even if it's using sketches, even if it's using photographs, even if it's using like text on screen. He's like, I'll do whatever I can to get the message that I want out there to the public and to finish this project. And that passion and dedication, against all odds, I have to respect him for it, because he did what he wanted to do and said, screw you and your expectations. This is what I want my story to be. And I'm like, okay, I can respect that. Whereas with Game of Thrones, the creators were like, we're just over it. And I'm like, that makes me mad, because if you've been at least dedicated to the series, it's like, you can't see it through. You can't give it the passion that it deserves. The fudge. At least with Anno, he did what he could. And he tried and got the message out that he wanted. I'm like, I've got to respect him. I've wasted too much time. We need to get through this episode. I'm so floored. I'm so floored. Because it's like all this lore, everything. And I'm going to turn the sound down. Because yeah, it's like, become a legend. He has inadvertently become a legend. Again, End of Evangelion. I'm tailoring a lot of my expectations. Again, we have questions that have not been answered. We're gonna just wrangle this off here. I don't have a lot of questions left. It's mainly just wanting a resolution to the actual plot. Like I feel like we got a resolution to the psychological aspects we've been building up this whole show, but I want a resolution to the plot now. And it's funny because Anno's created this whole series kind of as a, subversion and kind of anti-archetype of the sci-fi shonen plot, being like, well, you think this is a mech anime, but it's not, right? So yeah, I just, oh my god. So yeah, interesting. But yeah, I just love that he's like, no, this is not what this episode's going to be about. I should have seen it coming when the penultimate episode was the way that it was. I don't know what I expected out of this episode. Was not this. Part of it was, I did wonder if Shinji would realize something about himself, that it's going to be okay. And all the things that happened in this episode are what I hoped he was going to realize. But then everything else, I was like, I am so amazed. I was like cheering for Shinji by the end of it. And then from the alternate reality on, I was like, ah! Okay, so there's a lot of stuff thrown at us. And it's like the year is 2016 AD. So it's like we're entering the new year, right? So I'm going to put this over here. That we have 2016 AD. So the question is, how much time has passed? How much time has passed since he was absorbed into the primordial soup? Because 2016 AD, I'm like, the thing of it is, and y'all noted this about the seasons, is that there's not really winter anymore. So it's really hard to tell months. Like, unless they tell us the exact month, we don't know, is it winter? Is it fall normally? Because there's no seasons anymore, it's hard to tell. That passage of time becomes harder and harder to discern. So I want to make note of that. That's kind of an interesting thing, is that because of the environment, the passage of time is skewed. And I think that's really important because Shinji's whole thing is that time, you are constantly changing and time moves on whether you like it or not. But if you're in like a state of one season and it makes it harder to tell that passage of time, it kind of warps your perception a little bit, right? So that's interesting. But the year is 2016 AD. The thing that people had lost, okay, I'm going to wait till we get the thing that people had lost. In other words, the instrumentality of souls was still ongoing. Okay, so the instrumentality of souls is still ongoing. So we don't know how long this has been going on. We don't know how long Gendo's experiment has been happening. And if Gendo's even a part of the experiment, if Gendo's like watching like an omnipotent god above everything, we don't know. So there's that. And then, however, there's far too little time left to make mention of it all. Damn it. Yeah, Anno's like, yeah, this is still going on, but we only have this episode to talk about it, so it's there. Like, I feel like that's Anno just being like, we'll save it for End of Evangelion, right? There's far too little time to make mention of it all. Therefore, now we will take the boy named Shinji Ikari. Okay, and tell the story of the instrumentality of his soul. So we don't even get part 2 of Masato and Asuka. I'm going back to this. Be like, okay, never mind. So the part 2 of Asuka and Masato, are we gonna get that? Is Gendo? Here's the thing. This is the thing that's kind of crazy. Is Gendo and his thing with the instrumentality. If you notice, when they're on the stage and there's all those characters talking to Shinji about the lowercase truths and about his soul and everything, I assume that they are all people that have been killed and are now involved in this primordial soup, which includes Maya, which we didn't see Maya, but it includes Hyuga. Which Hyuga being dead would tie to the fact he was working with Masato, so I could see Gendo getting rid of him too. That makes sense. And then Fuyu's there, so was Fuyu killed by Gendo? We don't know. But those players are there. And so I assume they're all involved in the instrumentality, but Gendo is not a voice that talks to Shinji. He only sees Gendo at the end when he sees him with Yui. So I don't know. So we don't really get much with that. So that's going to be curious to see if in now End of Evangelion, I'm like, what the fudge is going to be in this movie? So the instrumentality of his soul, case 3. Case 3. I also want to make note that in the comments before we started, there were 3 people that say the Anno credits to saving his life. So the number 3 has had a major significance to him. So case 3. Also, Shinji's the 3rd child. In the case of Shinji Ikari, fear. All right, so we're going to talk about, put up Shinji here. Shinji and his existential crisis. And what Shinji discovers. So angle 1 is about fear. All in red. Of course it is. And then the candle of ceasing to exist. Yes, the candle burning out. Of ceasing to exist. And I love that we see the candle burning and the bottom of it is like a blue flame and it's like an orange-red flame. It's combining those colors together. It's great. But considering the way I am, I don't think I need to exist. And then we see the suit that's just like, ugh. So Shinji questions his need to exist. Like, why am I here? All of these existential questions Shinji posits in this episode are ones that I think could impact anybody, that anybody could ask questions about, which is fun. And they're like, well, why not? And he's like, I'm not needed. And then we see Asuka, right? So we get like a little shot of Asuka and the idea of not being needed. Okay. And the idea, and I love the Shinji with the shadow of him, and it's all like that red. Oh, I'm an unwanted child after all. No one cares what happens to me. So the idea of being unwanted, of being not needed, and of being hated are all fears that Shinji has. He's afraid of those 3 things, which honestly are things that I think anybody would be afraid of, right? So I'm questioning, and it says, you're running away by thinking that it doesn't matter. And so Masato is there. There's Masato over there. Masato is over here saying that running away is avoiding what matters. And it's not necessarily, I like that they frame running away not as not that you're a coward, but that you are wanting to close everything off. You're just trying to isolate yourself. It's about isolation, right? So it's about this whole deal of isolating. If I just stay in isolation, I won't have any issues. I won't have any problems. But that becomes complicated and kind of contradicted throughout the rest of this episode. You're just thinking that it doesn't matter. And you're afraid of failure. And Shinji, I love how you just look so disgruntled. You're afraid that people won't love you, aren't you? You're afraid of seeing how weak you are. And that's another thing. So it's being unwanted, not needed, hated, and then being afraid of failure and weakness. It's that idea of showing all of yourself. And that's the thing. It kind of goes back to Asuka too. Like if you're weak, then you can't be relied upon. And if you're weak, you're not strong. And if you're weak, if you can't be relied upon and people don't need you, then are they going to love you? So it's all interconnected, right? And he says, but that's how you are too, Miss Masato. And so here we have Masato kind of represents Shinji, like this inner voice in Shinji's head that she's kind of representing. You know, she's always been the one to talk to him about being strong and not running away and doing these things. And he's like, he flips on her. He's like, well, you're a hypocrite because here's how you are. And he's like, you're exactly like me. So what right do you have to tell me these things, right? And she says, we're all the same. And it goes to Ritsuko too, saying that we are all the same. She's like, I can talk to you about these things because I'm just like you. I can speak from experience that you have as well, right? So she frames it in this moment. or the she inside of his head is saying, yeah, I can talk to you about this because I'm coming at it from the same place you are. So it's funny, we can talk about this isolation together because we all experience it together. It's a big old irony, right? And then we see Ritsuko, there's a piece of our hearts that's missing. That's what we're afraid of. It makes us insecure. And that's the big thing, is this sense of insecurity with ourselves. We're afraid of what other people think of us. We're afraid that we don't love ourselves, so we can't love others. It just that insecurity connects to so many things. And so then it's like the instrumentality angle is the creepiest thing about this. Again, we talked about this in comments. I don't like the idea of everyone becoming one in the soup. It's just, and ceasing to exist. Shinji goes through this whole bout about it. It's creepy. And it's like a horror angle of it. And I'm like, nope. And so becoming one is talked about in this. That's why we're all trying to become one right now, to make up for each other. That's the Instrumentality project. Humans cannot live unless they're in groups. So humans, and then Gendo kind of talks about this, humans must be in groups. Right? And we see it all. And then the imagery of that note, humans cannot live unless they're in groups, juxtaposed with the cemetery of all the headstones together. Freaking horrific. I'm like, what? And then humans cannot live alone. And we see Yui's grave. It says, even though there's only one of you. So we see this little thing about about Tokyo 3, and it says August 15th, 2015. But I don't know what that says. I don't know what that line there is that says the number 113722. So if y'all know what that means, there's something that has to do with August 15th of 2015. I don't know what that is. What does that mean? Is that when the Instrumentality project began? What, or is that when Shinji came? Is that when Shinji came to start working at Nerve? And that's why you suffer. And we see the green light. That's why you're lonely. I love that. We have the green traffic light that's like signaling knowledge. We see the ball by itself in the gym, which ties back to Toji from episode 16 when he was by himself becoming the fourth child. And he was he was alone with his suffering. Okay. So it's like, but humans must be in groups. We hate to be alone. It leads to suffering and loneliness. Right? Okay. And then that's why you want to meld your body and soul with someone else's. And Masato says that. Masato, I'm about to choke on my own spit. Masato talks about we want to meld body and soul with someone else. Now, when she says that, I don't think she's referring to the Instrumentality project. I think she's talking about having sex. Because, yeah, that's like when you literally become one with somebody when that happens. So she's referring to that, which seems like a much more... You retain some of your autonomy in that case, right? You want to become one. Which, again, going back to every, the Fly Me to the Moon, going back to all, the voiceovers, all the voices to Shinji in these previous episodes, it's all, it seems like every time he's been in the Eva and when the angels attacked and tried to, in episode 16, it was all going back to the idea that it's been hinted at all along, the Instrumentality project, and now it's finally, coming to fruition, and I hate it. Humans are made of weak and fragile things. Yes, yeah, exactly. Humanity is weak and fragile. Absolutely. That's just part of it, right? And we see the broken glass there, the broken mug. But the body and soul are also made of weak and fragile things. That's why we must complement one another through instrumentality. I'm like, yeah, I get the idea that we have this gaping hole in our hearts. Yes, but we'll talk about this. I don't like the idea of the instrumentality. I'm like, no, I don't like it at all. And they're like, why? And Gendo says, because we cannot live otherwise. I beg to differ, Gendo. And I think by the end of this, Shinji comes to that conclusion as well. Yeah, Gendo says that to live, we need instrumentality. And to get back what was quote-unquote lost. Because there's been talk this entire series about how Gendo and them, they found God, they found something that made them happy, which was like the way to fill in that gap to their heart, and then it disappeared, and Gendo seems to be trying to, like, he's been trying to get back to that place they discovered briefly ever since, right? And this was his conclusion that he got. And I'm like, okay. This is we cannot live otherwise. And they're like, really? I like that it's really, and it's white and black, almost like it's Kaoru saying, really, are you sure? Because that could be like the Cruel Angel's thesis is like, yeah, humanity is doomed to always have this part missing, but the reality, as this episode talks about, is that your reality is just hinged on whatever you make of it. You don't have to live in sorrow or depression. I feel like it's Anno like trying to come into himself, being like, I don't have to be depressed. Like it's Anno trying to like self-diagnose and self-cure him through this series. And then we see the droplet of water rippling. What are you alive for? I don't know. So Shinji is saying that he doesn't know his purpose. And that's something Shinji's been struggling with this entire series, is not understanding, like, why am I here? And I'm just going to say it, if Gendo had been a better parent and had, like, I don't know, been a father to Shinji and an actual human being and not this mad scientist, then maybe Shinji wouldn't have had to question his purpose in life. I'm just saying, there seems to be some well-off characters in this world that seem to have, like, a relative sense of normalcy to them and like a healthy self-image. If Shinji's dad had just like, been an actual father to him and like, I don't know, not been Gendo, then maybe Shinji wouldn't have this existential crisis. Just saying. That, and maybe I'm living because I want to figure that out. So Asuka wants to, so that's tied to Asuka too. I'm going to put Asuka down here. Is that Asuka, she is living to find that purpose. Because she's like, I don't want to die like my mom did. I want to actually find out the reason that I'm here, right? And so we see her with that. And then Ray is like, who are you living for? For myself, of course. And for myself, I think. And so I like this idea of, between the two of them, this idea of living for oneself, which this episode kind of explores the fact of, yes, you need to love yourself, you take care of yourself and love yourself and live for yourself, and the rest of it you kind of determine along with that. And they're like, really? And I love, we see the backs of them. We see the backs of Asuka, of Shinji, and of Rei. We see their back to the audience being like, are you happy to be alive? And then it's like, I don't know. Are you happy to be alive? Of course I'm happy. And then we see, are you happy to be alive? And like, I only wanted to do what I enjoy doing. And we see Masato like pixelated her in Kaji's hands. That censorship. We gotta censor that hand holding during sex. Gotta do that. But so the idea of just like being happy to be alive, knowing you have a purpose. That's a big part of this, of Shinji realizing that. Do you hate feeling lonely? I do love that Kaji saying, do you hate feeling lonely? It's the phone that's disconnected, the phone that never rings. I love that idea of like, you can't communicate with anybody through it. So it ties to that sense of isolation and loneliness. It's great. I don't like it. Do you hate suffering? I don't like it. Yeah. And then we see that it goes back and forth between the waves and the beach from when we had at the end of episode 24, Shinji and Masato talking about Kaoru's death. Is that why you run away? That's right. Because you hate loneliness. So part of that running away is that running away from pain. from pain and suffering and from that betrayal of others as you get to know them. And then we cut to that scene. I thought when we cut to the scene of Akagi's mom, like, or with her brain matter splattered all over one of the Magi, that we'd get some answers. Nope. Just going to remind you what's wrong with running away from the things you don't like. And I think that's interesting because it's the shot of Ritsuko's mom and the over the text of running away from things you don't like her running away from Ray or from baby Ray killing her. No. I shouldn't run away. I also love in this episode that like a lot of the imagery of the real world is like dingy and dirty and like they see the exit sign and it's rusted out. It's so grisly, right? And it's just kind of establishing that to Shinji, his reality is just kind of like rusty and dirty and gross, and he just wants to get away from it. He's running away from it. Why mustn't you run away? He says, because running away is painful. And we go back to that program, that song being replayed on his Walkman over and over again. It's like you're running away from pain, but the aspect itself is a painful process. The act of running is painful in itself, right? That it's painful to run away in the beginning in the first place. Even though you're running away from something painful. It was painful. Yeah, if you know it's going to be painful, then what does it matter? It's like, why if the process itself is painful, why are you doing it to begin with? What's the point? And then he says, yeah, you can run away if it's painful. But if you really hate it, yeah. So it's like, yeah, it kind of creates this conundrum. The act of itself, you know that it's painful to run away because you know it's wrong, but you're running away because it's painful. So why not? Like, why does it matter whether it's going to be painful either way? So what difference does it make? And then Shinji says, I don't want to run away anymore, which is like a big turning point, right? Shinji doesn't want to run away anymore. He's like, I'm done. And at that point I was like, okay, good. You don't want to run away anymore? Great. That means you can get out of this instrumentality. I fully have the belief, and I could be totally wrong, I fully have the belief that Shinji can get out of the instrumentality project because he's done it before. He got out of the primordial soup before. He can do it again. And I really thought he was going to this episode, but nope. So it's like, that's right. It's wrong to run away. Because you feel that it's more painful to just do so. And then we see the messages with the message button where Kaji's message was left for Masato. Because you learned how painful it is to run away. And we see Asuka represented in that scene. That's why you don't want to run away, isn't it? And then we see this device that I think it's from where the Evas get launched. I think that's what it is. There's a big old X in front of it. And then we see like the siren, right? If I run away, no one will respect me. So that's why it's part of the painful process, is because no one will respect. Okay. He's like, people think I'm a coward if I run away, right? And people have throughout this entire series, and that's why it's bothered him so much. He's like, don't forsake me. Oh, please don't forsake me. And we see Asuka. We see Asuka's all her stuff packed up, right? Like packed up, ready to go. And Shinji has a thing. I need to switch markers here in a minute. Where he says, don't forsake me. And he ties it to Asuka. All right. And then like the book there. And then it shows him crossing the threshold, quietly obeying what other people tell him to do as a survival mechanism. And we see him crossing over in the elevator, right? And that ties back to all those moments from the very beginning of the series where Shinji would like just do what everyone told him. And the idea of obeying being a survival mechanism. Yeah. Okay. Because if I don't, I'll be abandoned. So it's to obey, it's to avoid abandonment. And the sad thing is that, again, if Gendo had just been a good parent and not abandoned his kid on the side of the road, we wouldn't be in this problem. I'm just saying. I know there's a lot of people that like Gendo, but I'm like, I'm going to reserve all my final judgment till the end of the series. But as it stands right now, I'm like, Gendo, if you could just have been a great father to your kid, we wouldn't have a lot of these problems. Just saying. And so then we cut to the idea of being abandoned, and we see Ray with the bloody pillow. Why do we have to go back to the bloody pillow? I thought we were over that, but the bloody pillow is still there. It's gross. I don't like it. Afraid of being hurt. It's just what you've made yourself believe, isn't it? Shinji, you're not the only one who's hurting. And we see, I thought it was Kaoru talking when we saw the angel statue, but I think it was Toji, which would make sense. And so then there's this really cool aspect that they talk about in this scene is that the thing is that you're not the only one hurting. Because like we said at the beginning, back in the notes, that Shinji kind of avoids others and doesn't care what they think. But there's other people hurting just like Shinji. You're not the only one going through tough times. And we see the tricycle with the wheel broken off. Or the trike with the wheel broken off. Again, 3 wheels. It's a trike with a wheel broken off. But yeah, it's like you're not the only one hurting. There's always like a phrase that I was taught as a kid, and it was like, you can't really judge others because you don't know their story. You don't know if they're suffering just as much as you are. They probably are, and they're just not talking about it. And that kind of relates to this whole series. Everyone in this series has baggage and issues and has something terrible going on, but they don't talk about it with others, so others don't know. So then because they don't talk about it and others don't know, they assume that they're all fine, and it's like, oh, you guys are all fine because you're not talking about it being, having any problems, so maybe I'm the only one with issues. When the reality is, no, everybody else has issues. It's just we're not communicating. Right? There's just no communication, so we can't know. So Anno's like, you need to start talking to each other about this, and maybe this primordial soup conundrum wouldn't be happening right now. But yeah, you're not the only one going through tough times. You only believe that because it's easier to think that. Yeah, and then we get Hikari. I like that we get Hikari as the representation because she's had to deal with Asuka being like, it's easy to think that you are the only one suffering. Because like Hikari's had some stuff go on with her, like with Toji and everything, and dealing with Asuka, but if you don't speak up about it, nobody knows. And it's easy, and that kind of relates to the whole running away. It's easy to think you're the only one suffering because then you can put everything on yourself and not have to come to the conclusion that other people are in the same boat as you. And you can kind of isolate yourself, right? When that's the easy way out. Running is easy. And then they're like, shut up, this has nothing to do with it. And at this point, we start getting like photographs. We start getting like photographs of like a soda can on a bench. I do want to make note though, the soda can on the bench, it's the only light colored bench, like the white bench amongst all the black, and it has a white can on it. I don't know if there's any significance to that. And then we see all the cans of Coke in the bin. No one cares what happens to me. And so all the cans in the bin kind of remind me of Kaji rearranging them after that scene, but it seems like they just randomly took it. So it's like, no one cares about me. Which I do think that maybe there's a visual representation there of all the cans in the basket. Like everybody's all lumped together and there's no individuality. Tying to the Instrumentality project. The fudge. And then you're always so quick to dismiss your own self-worth. And we see the cross necklace that Masato has. So Masato's saying that you are quick to dismiss self-worth. That yeah, you don't think that you have any value. And so you're just quick to just dismiss it. And I feel like the cross necklace is also referring to the fact that Masato's in the same boat as Shinji. She also is quick to dismiss her self-worth, and that's why it's there. And then we cut to Ray, who says, because I have nothing. And it's the bloody bandages. So I'll put Ray on here. And put Ray over here. And so with Ray, it's the concept of having nothing. Because, yeah, a lot of you have pointed out, like I think somebody I don't know if it was the Discord or the comments pointing out that, yeah, Asuka and Shinji were with Masato, so even if it wasn't perfect, they still had a place to stay with each other. Rey's been all alone, like all by themselves. They've had nothing. So that's interesting. And so there you go again, making yourself believe that you're worthless. The idea of being worthless is something that comes across a lot in this episode. And that belief, and I'm going to be like, I'm almost to the end of this, belief of worthlessness. That they just don't belong because they don't have any self-worth. And I like that there's like a fence, like a guarded fence as the representation for this. It's like a closed off fence, right? Because if you believe that and do nothing, you won't be hurt. So yeah, if you believe that you're worthless and you just don't have any reason to connect with anybody, then yeah, sure, you'll never be hurt, but you'll also be by yourself and you won't ever, nothing will happen. It's like when he was talking about, it's like when he was talking about the sensei to Kaoru, he's like, those summers I spent with my sensei, nothing happened, but it was fine because all I had to do was exist. At this time, we know Shinji believed he was worthless. He's like, all I had to do was exist in that moment. And then nothing happened, but nothing good happened, but nothing bad happened. It was just stagnant, right? And so there's this line, you sustain your identity with the praise you receive from people. So it's that idea of just sustaining through the bits of positive reinforcement that you get. But that's the thing. It's just sustaining your identity. It's not living. It's not enjoying your life. You're just sustaining. It's just surviving. It's not doing what you actually are supposed to do as a human. So, and it's represented by the stairs, right? And then we see the post box. No one will accept me. You've made yourself believe that. So yeah, you make yourself, it's like you are responsible. And that's a big message of this is that you are responsible. You are responsible for your mindset of yourself. Yeah. You can't change what other people think about you, but you can change what you think about yourself. And that's going to impact how others see you as well. So it's kind of like a domino effect. And yeah, I love that Asuka's like, you made yourself believe that. Like, that's why I have to pilot the Eva. So then we get into this discussion about the Eva, right? I'm going to put this here. The talk about the Eva and its purpose. And I thought that this was going somewhere, but maybe End of Evangelion. And we have the basket on the bicycle. Which is funny because the basket on the bicycle is kind of like the bicycle is a carrier and you put things in the basket to be carried, like to be transported. And the Eva in a sense is a mechanism to transport them not only into the primordial soup, but also as a means to like transport them throughout the series, like in the mech. And then we have the shot of like the wine bottles and things at the store. And there's like a little creature that looks like Pin Pin. All right. You've made yourself believe that you're worthless to start with. Right? And then from there, that's what I have to do. And we see an auger and we see like all this deconstructed junk and they're like, that's not true. You probably just made yourself believe that. And we see like a crane and all this like junk and it's all chaotic and everything. So yeah, because you think you're worthless, you think you have to rely on the Eva to give you something. Like it's all in your head, right? And so from there, he says, no, I am worthless. And then we see it animated now. We see, okay, there's like a pit and there's the gun with the Eva. I have nothing to be proud of. Okay, so there's a gun blowing, there's an O1 unit blowing a hole in something. Maybe that leads to something, we don't know. So we're going to say that like there's a gun, there's the O1 gun, and then a hole in, is that leading to Central Dogma maybe? I don't know. Being a hold Central Dogma. Here's the crazy thing. I'm like, what if, I'm going to switch colors. What if this entire episode 26 is just showing what's been going on in Shinji's brain? Meanwhile, the Eva unit like took its gun and like fired into Central Dogma to get down to Adam to have whatever shit. And we won't find out what's happened until we get to End of Evangelion. If that's the case, I'm going to be amazed. I'm going to be like, yes, please. If there's been a whole side plot and these questions getting answered and stuff going on while we've been dealing with Shinji's inner thoughts in episodes 25 and 26, I'm here for it. Let that be the case. I'm like, that whole thing there, I'm like, is Anno hinting at something? Okay. And then we see the bra and Asuka's thing on top of her bag. I have nothing to be proud of. That's why you pilot the Eva. So you pilot the Eva to be proud of yourself. All right, there's that aspect of why you pilot. Okay. And then by piloting the Eva, I can be me. And we see Asuka and Shinji's units. So I can be me. It gives them a sense of identity. They think that they have no identity on their own. So piloting the Eva will give them that. Right? And so then we see like all this, like the bags and stuff. I had nothing before I started piloting the Eva, right? Tying to that sense of worthlessness. I'm allowed to be here because I pilot the Eva, right? So it's the idea of just, they have no purpose aside from that. I have nothing else because I have nothing else. So yeah, there's nothing else. So it's kind of creepy that Gendo chose these 3 children. It's like, it's the weirdest thing. Asuka was chosen because of her psychological baggage, because she dealt with all this shit, that they were like, oh, you'll be perfect for this Eva because that's the only thing, it'll be your purpose in life, right? So there's that, which is messed up. It's also messed up that Rei was literally constructed to be a pilot for the Eva. She was made to be that way. So that's messed up. And Gendo, in abandoning his son and putting all this psychological pressure on him and strain, it made him perfect to be a pilot for the Eva because it seemed like that would be his only purpose. So it's these 3 individuals were tailor-made to be pilots for the Eva. And Toji didn't work out because he wasn't tailor-made and didn't fit the mold. So I have nothing at all. And seeing Shinji in front of the sun, it makes my life worth something. Nothing. So I hate myself. And so we got back to the idea that Shinji hates himself. Okay. He hates himself, and that's where we're at. And then we have the line. And the line, God, the phone conversation where it's everyone's voice just saying how much they hate Shinji, and it's him holding the phone. Like, to be fair, if you're someone that's struggling through depression or a lack of self-worth, then yeah, it'd be very easy for you to think that everyone hates you. And I imagine this was like Anno being like, and again, you had not only, this is kind of like a meta look at outside of the series, Anno struggling through depression and not meeting deadlines of his work not getting done the way they wanted to. People in the studio were probably upset at him and mad at him. And so this scene, and then he receives death threats after this episode airs. Like this scene of people on the phone telling Shinji that they hate him very much could be Anno receiving the same thing. And it's really sad. Like if you look at this episode and know where Anno was psychologically, it's pretty messed up. I mean, it makes the ending nice because I'm like, okay, good for you, Anno, I think. But it's so messed up, right? He's like, I hate the person that you are. And all these people just saying that they hate him. He's like, see, everyone thinks so. But they're like, I know, he says, I know that's what they think. And they're like, you're just making yourself believe that. And we go back to the shot of the fan and the blanket. So like the fan we got in the last episode in 25 of him looking at Masato and Masato being embarrassed. That could tie not only that you're just making yourself believe that isn't just what Shinji thinks, but it's what Masato is thinking as well. And it's like, no, you just make yourself believe. You don't know what everybody else is thinking. You can't get into their minds. You're not telepathic. This world doesn't have telepaths that we know of. It's like, so you can't know what people think about you. It's just how you project it. So you don't really, the idea that you don't know, and you cannot know how others perceive you. And that's been one of the biggest struggles for Asuka and Shinji, is that they think that people believe a certain thing about them. Like Asuka's whole deal is like how she projects herself and how others receive her. And I'm like, but the thing of it is, you can't control that and you can't know it. So if people hate you, you may not be able to change their minds. Like you can try to be nice and maybe alter their perception by your actions and getting to know them and breaking down that barrier, but none of these characters are doing that. And so it's like, you can't control how people see you. Like that's just part of it, right? And it's because it's like, no, I hate myself. And we see like broken concrete. So you've made yourself believe that everyone else thinks that too. And I like that it goes down a storm drain, because if you go down a storm drain, you don't really know what's under there. You can't see it. So you just kind of tell yourself what you think is down there. And so that's sort of the thing of you make yourself believe that everyone else thinks that too. It's like you think everyone else hates you just because that's what you want them. That's what you've convinced yourself. You're so self-loathing that you've convinced yourself that other people hate you when you don't know that. And it's just, oh God, this whole episode's filled with different pieces of information. And I'm like, no, yes, this is all making sense now. And we go through like the ransom note flash thing, but they still praise me. And we see the bicycle at the bottom of the stairs. Some of the imagery here is so bizarre, but intriguing. They still praise me. They'll praise me if I pilot the Eva. And again, we go back to the bicycle. There's no basket on it right now, but we go back to the bicycle. They'll praise me if I pilot the Eva. So they'll like me if I pilot the Eva. I hate myself and I think they hate me, but if I pilot this Eva, then maybe they'll like me instead. Maybe they'll think that I'm great. People praised me and it was in red, like the shot of Shinji. People praised me. That's why I'm happy. People praised me and it's orange, but it doesn't make me happy. Ah, I love it. So he's saying that praise is why I am happy, but it doesn't make me happy, which is a weird thing to say, but it's like the praise is a source of happiness. The praise is a source of happiness, but it doesn't cause that happiness. It's weird. There's like a disconnect there, right? Which is intriguing. And it says, which way do you really feel? And we get all the angels, we get Rei, we get the static, we get the opening, we get all these things with Kaoru, and occasionally we get like Asuka and Shinji matching up. Oh, that's a great shot. I want to get a shot of that because it's kind of creepy. But yeah, we get Asuka and Shinji matching up. Like he says, I don't know why I feel happy. Okay. I don't know. And we get all the angels, like everything here. Okay, both ways are real. Oh, okay. Why do you pilot the Eva? That's why you pilot it, right? Oh my gosh, some of these shots are great. I'm trying to get like one good shot of Shinji. That's all I have right now. And we see Kaoru and Shinji together because otherwise you can't maintain your identity. So without the Eva, you can't maintain that identity. So without it, you don't really know what you are. So you can't, with the Eva, it gives you at least an answer, right? But without it, you don't know. And we get all the different symbolism. It's great. It's true. Eva 1 is a part of who you are. Okay. So the idea that the Eva, I loved this part. This part was probably one of my favorite in the episode. The Eva is a part of you. You've made it a part of you. It's a part of who you are, right? And we see like all that there. But then what else do we get? I'm trying to go through this. But if you keep clinging to the Eva itself will become you, right? So if you cling, then the Eva becomes you, right? It's that idea of that identity, right? That if you do something for so long, it eventually becomes part of you and it will become you, right? So it's so bizarre. It's like that environment shapes you, right? And if you stay at it too long, it will become essentially a part of you that you can't disconnect, right? Oh, and that shot of Gendo. Ooh, that shot of Gendo is really creepy too. I'm trying to get some like creepy shots to share in the Discord. And doing that, it'll eventually become you. Interesting. Okay. Ooh, the entry plug part is really creepy too. The Eva itself will become all that you are. Mm-hmm. It's kind of one of those things, like, I guess the easiest way to think about it is if you have a profession, or if you are involved in something like the military or something, if you become part of an environment that's very specific, then that becomes who you are and all you are, right? It's kind of weird. I guess the tamest example I can think of it is that I did forensic, like, competitive speech. And so you kind of become part of that world, and you become like a competitor in the speech world. There's like all these different things about it. But eventually, you know, some people move on and, you know, go on with the rest of their lives, and then others stay in that world. But the more you stay in it, the more it becomes like it ties it's kind of like symbiotic. It ties itself to your identity. And so there's people I know that speech is everything. It's all their lives revolve around. And that's kind of true of anything. It can be true of being in the military. It can be true of being a parent. Like, it can be true of being a teacher. It can be true of, like, you know, working in a prison, being a cop. It can be true of, like, any profession. The longer you become a part of it, the longer you're in it, it starts to, like, meld into your identity, and it becomes a part of you, and you can't escape it. It's kind of weird, right? So, like, it's sort of like me being a teacher. I've been a teacher so long that, you know, whiteboard coon, all this, even doing something like on a YouTube channel, that part of me is there, and it doesn't go away. And so it's become like melded to my identity. And so it's sort of insane and kind of creepy, but it's true, right? And that's what they're saying. Like, the Eva is going to become all you are. And if it's something like teaching or something that's harmless becomes part of who you are, that's not a bad thing necessarily. But if it's something, if you can't see past it and have your own identity and sense of who you are outside of that, that can be harmful or toxic, right? So it's the idea that the Eva will be all you are. And the thing that can be toxic and negative about that is, what if you don't have it anymore? Like, this whole series has had the question of, once the angels are destroyed, what do we do with the Evas? What if they're not needed anymore? Then for, like, the pilots like Asuka and Shinji and Rei, without that sense of purpose, especially if it's tied to, like, your only sense of pride or praise, without that, what are you left with? And Asuka's kind of been the example of that. Asuka's been the if you tie everything to that Eva and suddenly you don't have it, what does it do? And then you're left with nothing, and you become depressed and suicidal. And so that's kind of insane, right? But it's such an interesting, and it's been something we've been building up this whole series to, and we finally have it. And it's like, oh my God, it'll become all that you are. Mm-hmm. And we see all the angels. I'm trying to see if we see anything else. The real you will cease to exist. And I love that shot of Rey with the moon from back in episode 4 or 5. The idea, the real you ceases to exist. And we kind of had that happen with Asuka, is that she connected all of her identity to that Eva and towards being a pilot and trying to, like, prove herself through that. The real Asuka got lost. And then we finally, like, stripped all that down. She was just like a hollow shell of herself. But yeah, if you tie yourself too much to something, too much the identity to something that's not you, the real you will cease to exist. I love that idea, that concept. And then, God, the imagery is great. And he says he doesn't care. I never had anything to begin with anyway. Oh, and that shot of Kaoru is really great too. That's over him. I never had anything to begin with. But that's not true, right? No, it's not true. And they say even the cello lessons I used to take came to nothing. Now, see, the cello lessons, that part, I was like, well, no, that's not it. And I'm glad that Masato's voice kind of came onto that too and was like, no. It said that's because you never took the initiative to make something of it. And we have the classroom of the kids, right? The teacher's trying to tell them stuff in the class, and they're not doing anything with it. They're just staring. That was a thing, too, as a teacher. All the teacher scenes at the beginning when the teacher was trying to tell them stuff that was, like, really pertinent to the history of their world, and the kids were just ignoring it. I was like, you might want to pay attention to that history so you don't repeat it, you know? And so that's interesting that they said the whole thing with the cello. I'm going to put this, where do I put it? I don't want to flip my parkoon over yet. But the idea of the cello, of the cello being nothing. And then the voice, I don't know if it's Ray or Masato, saying that you need to take the initiative to make something of it. Like, no. Do not blame this on something else. Being like, no, don't blame this on the cello lessons. You didn't do anything with the cello lessons because you didn't take the initiative. You didn't try to make something of it. You were just going through the motions and being stagnant. Like, you have to take control and take action. Otherwise, you're not going to accomplish anything. Of course it didn't work out. And then, but I can pilot the Eva now. And eventually, you won't be able to do anything without the Eva. And there's that shot of Gendo. Oh my God. Insanity. Eventually, you can't do anything without the Eva, which is what's happened with Asuka. Yeah, it's all just explaining how this works. And that's why I was hoping, and I want to get a shot of that one too. I'm going to stop taking pictures of all the things, but it's so cool. You could take a whole montage. I'm sure somebody has done that, but you could take a whole montage of it. But yeah, eventually, you won't have a purpose without the Eva. And I'm like, was that Gendo's plan all along, to get these kids like symbiotically attached to the Eva where they felt like they couldn't do anything without it? Wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, that's where we're at. It's like, it's the answer of, can you move on from the Eva? Would you be able to? And that's what Shinji struggles with throughout most of this episode. And like me, and then we see all the images of Asuka. She's like, you're just like me. Why do you pilot the Eva? Because it's all I have. The beast that shouted love at the heart of the world. What an episode title. And we go back to the beast from episode 2, like the beast, like that human that shouted love at the heart of the world. Or take care of yourself. One is like a really violent like expression, and one is like really soft and tender. Fitting for this episode. And so then we get into that was short-lived. Then we get into Ray's poem. We go back to Ray's poem, in a sense, and we go back to everything tied with happiness and non-happiness. And I loved this sequence because it was Shinji, Asuka, and Ray talking. And Shinji says, so we have rain, a depressing mood. A depressing mood. And he says, it's like the mood I'm in. I don't like it. So his mood, don't like it. Okay. And then we say, and that was Shinji. And then we have sunset. So we have rain, sunset. And from that, we have sunset, a vanishing life, my wish. So my wish of a vanishing life. So her wish not to exist anymore. I don't like it. Yeah. So her wish, Ray's. She doesn't like it. All right. And then we have morning. So we have morning, and this is Asuka. Morning. And from there it says the start of today, the start of an unpleasant day, the start of an unpleasant day. I don't like it. So we have these three sources of despair for these characters. We have rain with Shinji, and for Shinji, rain signals his depression, which he doesn't like. For Ray, we have sunset, which is a sign of a vanishing life, which she doesn't like because that's what she hates the idea that she doesn't want to exist. And then you have Asuka, the morning, the start of an unpleasant day that she doesn't want to have to deal with. She doesn't like it. So I love that kind of like poetic element with all three of those. It ties back to Ray's poem. And then we say the blue sky, right? And so then we have the blue sky, Shinji talking again. And it's tied to warmth, right? The blue sky tying to something warm, something I'm not used to, something frightening, something that's not needed. So something unknown, something that is not needed, something terrifying, which is so interesting. Something terrifying. I don't like it. So yeah. Oh man. So Shinji saying this. I love that we have the rain and the blue sky. So Shinji he's depressed, right? Shinji's just suffering from depression. And of course, rain, we think rain of being depressing, but for Shinji, the blue sky, warmth, you think of something being warm and it's inviting and you're like, well, that's a good thing. It's a very good thing, right? But for Shinji, he's like, I don't know what that's like because he's never experienced like love from anybody but Kaoru. He's like, I don't know what that's like. He's like, I don't think it's needed. He's like, I can survive without it. So it's an unknown. I don't know how to feel about it. It's terrifying and he doesn't like it. He's uncomfortable because it's the unknown and he's afraid and he doesn't like that about it. And then we have Asuka saying, everyone, I just hate everyone. And then we have Masato looking very sexy saying, what do you desire? So what do you desire in opposition of this? What do we do? And it's Masato. Now, again, we're tying back to, there's been a lot of talk in the Discord and in the comments about the whole Shinji and Masato and the sex angle. Again, I don't think that Shinji and Masato have had sex, but I think that in this primordial soup, he's getting a mix of Masato's emotions. So maybe he's seeing this from her perspective talking to Kaji. I don't know. But her saying, what do you desire? Are you afraid of being insecure? So yeah, what do you desire? Are you afraid of being insecure? What do you want? And we have Asuka saying this. And Asuka's like naked saying this. What do you want? Do you want peace of mind? Okay. So we have that. And then we have Rei saying, what do you seek? So we have the three women. Also, I want to make note, Gendo, that we know of, has slept with three women, which has been Yui, Ritsuko's mom, and Ritsuko. And Shinji in his brain has Masato, Rei, and Asuka. So again, rule of three. What do you seek? And then don't hate me. Okay. And the funny thing is that all these questions and all of these answers they're all mix and matched between Asuka, Rei, and Masato. So they could all be tying to all of them, but also to Shinji. So it's kind of crazy. Don't hate me. We see the doll and the moon. What I'm afraid of is rejection. So, afraid. And then we see Shinji says rejection. He's afraid of rejection. Makes sense. And Rei says, what I want is to connect and be recognized. Because that's the thing. Shinji's whole thing is that he's afraid of being rejected by his father. And he's afraid of being rejected by others. And he's afraid of being hated by them. So that all makes sense with Shinji's character. Rei has been by herself this entire series and feels closed off, like she can't talk to people and relate to them. So of course she wants to be connected and to be recognized, to be seen as human. And then, is it okay if I stick around? Is it okay if I stay here? And so there's the idea of, can I stay here? Which again, there's the image of Shinji like nursing from Yui, but it's also the concept of, do I have a place in this world? Can I stay in this world? Is that okay if I don't want to die? Do you love me? Can I stay here? Do you love me? That sense of belonging, that sense of acceptance, that sense of being loved, like it's what any human wants, right? Do you love your mother? And so then we have Asuka, which I love that we have Asuka and her child form, and it's kind of like a comparison from the last episode, right? Do you want to go to your mom? No. And then we have Shinji, are you going to go to your father? I don't want to. I don't want to. Why not? And then we see Rei. Now, I want to make note, the little Rei, we see Asuka and Shinji looking down at Rei, and little baby Rei is there, and she's like, why not? But she's got her hand behind her back, and I'm like, is Ray like gonna pull out a shank and just like knife the two of them? Like that's what, like little kid Ray seems like a little psychopath for some reason, I guess based on episode 21. So I'm like, it just looks creepy. I'm like, why is her hand behind her back? I don't like it. Because I'm afraid. I'm afraid he'll hate me. And so that's Shinji's thing. I'm afraid I might cease to be me. So yeah, so you have Shinji. He fears his father's hate. And so he runs away from his father. And then you have Asuka, who her whole thing is that she fears losing herself. So she denies her mother. Because I feel like Asuka, she wants to establish that she's different than her mom. She's not like her mother because she sees how bad her mother is and sees that her mother like kills herself. And so she's like, I don't want to see myself being in that same position or having that same fate. So she's like, I don't want to cease to being me. So she rejects her mom, and Shinji fears his father's hatred, so he just runs away from it. So we see that connection between the two of them, right? And they say, so what do you desire then? A resolution. So we tie back to these questions. So then what do you desire? And it's like a resolution to the insecurity. That's what he desires. So then what do you seek? And it's like a resolution to loneliness. So resolution to loneliness. All right. So we kind of cut out Asuka there. You're not happy, are you? And then we see Yui, and she has Shinji's eyes. She looks a lot like Shinji. So then we see Yui. And Yui over here says, you're not happy, are you? And we see Shinji being like, I want something before that. I want to be worth something. So Yui to Shinji, he says, I need worth. I need self-worth in order to be happy. Right, and we see the idea of him closing the hand and the fist. And I love the idea that he finally closes the fist and shakes it. He's like, I want to be worth enough so no one will abandon me, so they'll care about me. And then we see Gendo walking away. I want to be worth something. And then, but she says, no, only you can find that worth. Only you can find worth. It's like, it's a thing that we've talked about the last episode too. It's like you want people to recognize you, but they can't love you if you don't love yourself, right? And her looking down, and Shinji's just kind of like, what? That's why you pilot the Eva. And he says, I'm worthless. And we see Asuka with the same expression. My life isn't worth enough to live. Then what are you? And we see all the Rays asking the question, be like, well, if you're worthless and your life isn't worth it, then what are you? What's the point? He says, what am I? And then we see, and what's crazy is the image of Shinji with the shadow there kind of looks like the Lance of Longinus, right? It kind of looks like that. It's sort of bizarre. It says, what am I? So, what am I? Is another big question that this is asking. So if I don't have any sense of self-worth, what am I? And then we see Shinji, and he becomes okay, this is the part where I was like, all right, I could see why Anno cleverly is like, okay, look, I took Shinji in this animated form, and then I deconstructed him down to a Copic marker sketch. But the reality is we ran out of budget and we had to go this way. But the way that he makes a kind of mold into that, it's like, but it's intentional, right? That's what it seems like, right? So I kind of love it. This is me. It's the form of me that I show to others. It's the symbol that is me. So what am I? There's the form. There's the symbol I show others. It's all about the persona. I like the idea of a self being represented as a symbol. It's like, what's beyond the surface. So is this, and this, and this. They're all just things that represent me. And then we see all the images of Shinji. They're merely what other people recognize as me. So on the outside, it's how others see me, how they perceive me, right? And you have no control over that. You can't control how people perceive you. You just can't. They're just merely what people recognize as me. Then what am I? Well, where do I exist? Is this me? So there's a question of where do I exist? All right. I love that Otto's just like spending this whole episode going through this existential crisis. It's great. Is this me? And we see all these versions of himself. The real me. I want to go back and see what that one sketch was. Then what am I? Where do I exist? Is this me? The real me? The false me? Ooh. I want to kind of go back through later and look at all those images for the Discord. But yeah, the false me, you are you. Yep. So then, and Ray's like, I love the image of Ray in this scene because she kind of looks over it. I love that image where she's like Baka. She's like, I solved the riddle with the angel like 2 episodes back. She's like, I already figured this out. She's like, you are you. What else do you want? Yeah, I love it. It's like the only thing is there's a distinct difference between the actual scope of who you are. And he's like, that's right, my clothes. And we see like the suit, my shoes. So yeah, so you are you. And so your clothes, your environment, the people you interact with, your profession, they all help to construct who you are, right? My room, we see the stuff there. These are part of me. Yes. The things that are linked together through your consciousness. Yeah, it all helps to add who you are and your sense of self, right? The thing that I feel to be is me. I am nothing more than myself then. But I don't understand me. So yeah, what happens if you don't understand that person? That's a really good question. Where do I exist? What am I? What am I? That is why I wish for my soul to be closed off. So it's the idea that when you want to be closed off, he's like, it's because I don't understand myself. Like when people feel confident about themselves and they feel like they can express themselves, then they're not closed off. They're like sociable and everything. But sometimes when you're closed off, you just don't understand a situation and you kind of retreat into yourself and you're like, I need to think about it. And so you don't want to interact with others. And that's kind of like what Shinji's trying to say here. No one understands anything about me. And then I like that Asuka comes in and she's like, well, duh, no one understands you. So I like that Asuka in this moment, Asuka is like, only you can truly understand yourself. She's like, of course no one understands you. Like, how can they? They don't know your life. They don't know all your experiences. How could they? No one can understand anything about you. And I love that Masato stands beside him too, along with Asuka. The only person who can sympathize with you and understand you is yourself. Like at the end of the day. And I love that Masato and then it's like, so be good to yourself. And he's like, but there is no me. I don't understand. And so I like that Ray says that you have to be good to yourself. And Shinji tries to be self-loathing. He tries to say, but I don't get myself. And they're like, the three of them standing next to them. There's no way I can be good to that. And it's like, you're insecure. Like in the end, you're insecure. The way you are now, the people around you now, the environment that surrounds you now, none of these things will last forever. So they're like, that insecurity is temporary. They're like, yeah, if you're around people that make you uncomfortable, they won't be around forever. You can leave them. Like, that insecurity is not going to be there forever, right? Time will keep passing for you. Your world is made up of continual change. So yeah, everything is in its continual change. Nothing will stay the way that it is forever. That's like, that forever is like an impossible concept. Above all, it's up to your heart and mind. You can change the world at any time. So yeah, you change the world. So I do like the message of, it's kind of like anti-self-defeatist. It's like, no, you can change the world. Maybe not the world as a whole. Maybe not world peace, world changing, but if something is wrong in your life, you can do something about it. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a big groundbreaking thing, but you are somewhat in control of your world to an extent, right? Which is an interesting concept. And then I love the idea of Shinji just floating there, a world with nothing in it, a world with nobody in it. And so this is where we get back to the Instrumentality project 2.0. So I'm going to put the IP up here, the Instrumentality project. And so it is a world with nothing and no one. A world with nothing and no one is freedom. Yep. And so there's that. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. And then so we see Shinji like floating there. I love that shot of him just floating in the nothingness. A world of freedom. He's like, freedom, and where there's nothing restricting you. So there's no restrictions. And yes, that is freedom. And so, but in exchange, there's nothing. So there is no restrictions, but also there's nothing. And so again, obligatory Attack on Titan season 4 spoilers. Y'all knew it was coming. In the whole thing with Eren and the rumbling is that, now granted, with Eren and the rumbling, it's not just him alone. It's not just him by himself. He's doing it for the sake of Armin and Mikasa and the others on Parity. He's doing it for the sake of them. But he is essentially, his goal is to destroy everything else, the rest of the world. And it's under this guise that Eren believes that if I destroy the rest of the world, there will be no threats to us. There'll be no threat, no harm. There will be no restrictions. That will be freedom. My friends and I, they can live out their lives in peace. That will be the ultimate freedom if there's just nothing else around. And it's kind of derived from this. But the thing is, yeah, there'll be no restrictions, but there's also nothing. So that's kind of like Armin's sentiments in the story. He's like, but if we destroy everything around the world, there's nothing else. There is nothing. We're by ourselves. We're alone. The world will be empty. Is that a good thing? And this series, End of Attack on Titan spoilers, this series frames that nothingness as a bad thing. Like, yeah, there's no restrictions, but is that really what you want? Is that really what you want? And so as long as I don't think of anything, yes, as long as you don't think of anything. And he's like, I don't know what I should do. And it goes back to that question. So then, like, you would just exist, but is that living? Is it really just to exist? He's framed as a negative thing with Kaoru. So what do? And it's like, well, you're insecure. You don't have an image of yourself, do you? It's all just too vague. A world where there's nothing solid enough to grab onto. That's freedom. But is that a good thing? And so then I was like, a world where you can do anything you want with, but you're insecure, aren't you? So then you don't know what you should do. So here's the thing. You have this world of nothingness. Anything's possible, but if you're insecure, there's nothing to latch onto. You don't know what to do. So it's like, you need something, right? There needs to be some kind of anchor there, right? And so I like this representation that it does, where it's like, okay, well then we'll give you a restriction. It's Gendo talking. Now you have heaven and earth. I love it. So then, okay, well, if you're insecure, then we'll give you a restriction. We'll give you heaven and earth. There you go. See? There's something. So now you have heaven and earth, but you've lost one aspect of your freedom. So now you're grounded to reality. So that is a lost freedom. But is that a bad thing, right? Because they say that, yeah, you've lost an aspect of your freedom. You must stand on the ground. You're tied to gravity. But you feel more secure. So, but there's a security there, right? So what do we do with that? And so, because a small weight has been lifted from your mind. So yeah, there's an anchor there. So yes, that anchor does limit an aspect of freedom. But I think the important thing here is it doesn't take that freedom entirely away, right? It's a give and take, right? Because now, and you try walking, that is of your own will. So you still have your own will, which is also tied to that freedom. So you still have some freedom there. It's just you don't have complete freedom, but it's a sacrifice to gain something, right? This is my will. Yeah, a ground exists in this world, and that is a world that you live in. But you can move around it freely. So yeah, that's again tying to all that. The idea that you still have your own will. You can still move freely. Yes, you are somewhat restricted. You don't have total freedom, but total freedom may not be what you want. So it's so fascinating. If you wanted to, you can even change the position of the world. And it never stays still. So it's constantly in flux. So like the passage of time, it's like, I love that they phrase the passage of time. They phrase it, a lot of times we see the passage of time can be seen negatively, but here it's almost a positive thing because it's, nothing will stay the same, but that may include the good, but it also includes the bad. So like, good things will not last, but neither will the bad things either. It's just in flux. You yourself can change as well. And I love like the spiral, and it shows Shinji becoming the spiral, like the DNA strand, like an egg, like bursting out and becoming an angel. What is in your own mind and the world around you? And I'm just gonna point out, I'm just gonna say, I'm just gonna put it out there. Obligatory Attack on Titan spoiler, but the thing it says, what shapes you is your own mind and the world around you. Isayama, if you watched this episode and saw this little creature that's the first thing Shinji becomes when he hatches from the egg, and it looks exactly like the founder from Attack on Titan, I'm just going to put it out there. I'm just going to drop that there and say, as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, that's the founder from Attack on Titan. Like, ah! So yeah, there's that. But yeah, what shapes you is your own mind and the world around you. So your mind and the world shape you. It shapes who you are. It makes you a more well-rounded person. If there is nothing in the world around you, then you will be nothing. So yeah, it's finding that balance, and that's the hardest part, right? And so we'll talk about that. Yeah, but we see all the little angels, we see all the creatures. Yep. For you, this is your world. And we see the little cross with the halo. And then it burns away. It burns away and becomes water and becomes an eye. It's the form of reality that you perceive. I love that animation. That animation of the egg and everything. It's all so freaking good. That it is the form of reality that you perceive. Right? You are the protagonist of your own world. That is reality. And so he's like a space with nothing in it, a world with nothing in it, a world that has nothing in it except me. I'm losing my grasp. It's always creepy when they do this idea, like him just melting and becoming part of the primordial soup, where he's like, I'm losing a grasp on who I am and I'm disappearing. The existence that is me is vanishing. Why? Because you're the only one here. Yes. So it could be like my identity is vanishing because I'm the only one. That's the problem with the Instrumentality project. You won't have an identity or a sense of self at all because you're all by yourself, right? And we got all these squigglies. And he's like, because without the existence of things other than yourself, you cannot know your own shape. Like it's just going through all the shapes on the screen. It's like, if there's just a blank slate and there's nothing there, you won't know who you are. There's no way to do that, right? The image of me. To know your own shape is how to see how others are shaped and see how you're different, right? And then by looking at the barrier, you visualize your own shape. So it's like an AT field kind of, right? You can't see yourself unless there are other people. I can exist because there's other people around. Yes! I was like, the whole time I was like, absolutely. And we get like the self within a self within a self. If I'm alone, I'll always be alone no matter how far I go with it. Yes! So, alone, you can only go so far. You need to be with other people to help you realize who you are. All the world would just be me. And by recognizing the difference between yourself and others, you shape who you are. And I love that he looks so sad. He's like, oh, grumpy there. Like, well, but then the very first other person is your mother. I love that idea. Like the first other person you encounter in your life is your mother, right? Your mother is a person separate from you. Right. And I'm me. It's also certain that other people will shape my mind as well. And Shinji is going through, he's just realizing it. Yeah, he's coming to terms with everything. That's right, Shinji Ikari. You did it. Did you finally figure it out, stupid Shinji Baka? Yeah. And then he wakes up. So she's like, yes, you finally figured it out. And then we had the wake up scene. And it's like, at first I thought he was going to wake up in a hospital. I was like, oh, he's going to wake up in a hospital. But no! It's this other world. So I wanted to see if I noticed anything. There's a red handprint on a thing. There's a backpack. There's his clothes. There's his cello. There's the picture of Masato in the bikini. And there's like a little, like, looks like a robot and stuff. And there's the boombox. And his cassette player is there. Like, all the stuff is there. And there's Asuka. You're finally awake, stupid Shinji. And at this point, I was like, was this all a dream? Is that the route we're going with this? I'm glad it wasn't. But I wanted to make note that we have, and I actually anticipated having a lot more space on the board at this point, but we clearly don't. But so we have alternate reality versus reality of these characters. So we have Asuka and Shinji being childhood friends, which is great. The idea that they've been childhood friends instead of strangers, and that they're close to one another rather than like pulling each other away. It's great. She's like, I come over here every morning to make sure you aren't late for school. Like, she's like, and those are the words of gratitude you offer to your childhood friend. And he's like, yeah, thanks. So yeah, in this reality, they've known each other for their whole lives, and she helps him every morning get up for school. It's the polar opposite. And he's like, and he goes back to sleep. And then she says, she pulls the blanket off of him, but then she gets embarrassed because he's probably like either naked or just has his underwear on. Pin is a bobblehead. So Pin is a bobblehead. Just gonna make note that it is the bobblehead. Also want to make note that the clock says 8:10 a.m. The number 8:10 has been on like every episode. It's been going back and forth with that constantly. So there's something there. That should have been the sign that this was all a dream. That this was a dream within a dream. It was like freaking Inception. That should have been the sign to see the bobblehead. And she's like, I can't believe you. But for a second, I thought when they cut to Gendo and Yui, oh my God, I thought that this was like, they all became part of the primordial soup, and then like Gendo restarted the timeline, and it all just restarted from the second impact, and everybody just went back to this alternate reality, and maybe that is the case, and we just haven't gotten back to it yet, but I thought that maybe the timeline had restarted, and Gendo's like, well, we'll just restart the timeline before the angels and just redo the entire thing. I thought maybe that was the case, or we were entering like an alternate dimension at this point. But then, just like every other episode in this series, there is stuff happening in the top part of the screen on the radio, or that Shinji's talking, versus Gendo and Yui's conversation. And Gendo and Yui's conversation is pretty pointless, but it's the thing that we didn't know. So I want to see what it's saying, okay? So I gotta erase some of this. I'm sorry, but yeah. I want to erase some of this. You all know we already talked about this. So we're going to erase this right up here. Okay. And so we have the reporter. So we have the radio conversation. So we have the radio versus we have Gendo and Yui. Which, for the record, Gendo is still like a stick in the mud. Even when he's like in this alive, happy alternate universe, he's like, yes, dear. Mm-hmm. Yep, sure thing. Great. I'm like, the one scene we have of Gendo and Yui together, and he's totally indifferent. But okay, so we're going to transfer to our reporter. Okay, and she's like, oh, that's Shinji. And so Ibuki is the reporter. So Ibuki is the reporter. Okay, and we have Gendo. We don't see Gendo's face in this entire flashback or Yui's, right? We see a coffee pot and a thing that are made of clay. Oh, that's Shinji. Asuka's being nice and he's hopeless. So Yui is talking about her son as hopeless. Okay. And we see him looking at the paper. Okay. In the other occasion, I was just watching the cherry trees blossom, marking the beginning of the raining season. So there is cherry blossoms. So again, there's actually seasons, right? Because they established in previous episodes there weren't cherry blossoms anymore. So the cherry blossoms and raining season. Okay. And so then we cut to them saying, what else? Yes, dear. Yeah, all he says is yes, dear. At the second Tokyo Tower. So, second Tokyo Tower. Again, it's as if the second impact happened, but Yui didn't die and they didn't do the Eva project, right? So, like, stop burying a newspaper and get ready to go. Okay, where the traditional stairway climbing is about to begin. Traditional stairway climbing. Okay. And so she tells Gendo to get ready for work. Okay. All right. So what else have we got here? And he says, yes, dear. The participants are doing some preparation exercises. A grown man and you're no different than Shinji. So Yui says that Gendo and Shinji are the same. Like they're both like not ready for school, right? Okay. Let's hear them. Where did you come from today? I'm from Nerima district at Tokyo. Okay. That's pretty far away. Why the hassle for coming here? And so it wasn't a big deal. I can see the tower from where I live and got a day off of work. So the original Tokyo is still there. And everything seems normal. And meanwhile, she's like, Yui is thinking that she's going to get scolded by Professor Fuyu-chan. So Fuyu-chan is still a professor. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then saying when we're late to meetings, So they both go to meetings. Okay. So maybe they're both still working for the same company. Okay. And then saying, that's the spirit, give it your best. You're just that popular. Ha ha ha. Don't be silly, hurry up and get dressed. Okay. How about you guys from this school? And saying, he says, yes, dear. Give it your best too. He says, I know, Yui. Okay. So it says, South Pole Showa base opening its doors to visitors. First African-American female president. Okay. Crazy. All right. So South Pole opening. Huh. Okay. What? And it's 2016 on there. Okay. Which is the same time as the Instrumentality project. Oh. And then they see the apartments and everyone's there and they're all hanging out. And the crazy thing is, okay, here's the thing. The crazy thing is you see all of the apartments. Everyone else has a place. But the apartment that Shinji and Masato and all of them have been in this entire series is empty. Oh, I'm just the parallel of it. Oh my God. It's great. And so then we see like everything's polar opposite. So the inhabitants, so Tokyo is inhabited with lots of people. So it's the opposite of everybody abandoning and being evacuated. It's the opposite of all of that, right? And so Shinji and Asuka are running there, and she slaps him. Yeah, of course she slaps him across the face. And they're like, well, bye, Miss Sakari, see you later. I like she doesn't say goodbye to Gendo. No one does, right? Oh my god. And they're running. Are you going to put that newspaper down? I know, Yui. Oh my god. Again, we see the telephone poles. We see them running to the class. And then they're like, I wonder what the new transfer student's going to be like. Which is Ray. And Ray is super talkative, right? They transferred the capital here after all. There's going to be more and more people coming. I wonder what she's like. And then he's like, I hope she's cute. And Asuka's jealous. So some things never change, right? But then we have Ray with the toast. The toast trope where she's like running to school being late and she has the toast in her mouth. It's pretty bad if I'm late on my first day, right? And then she runs into Shinji. Oh my god. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm kind of floored that Anno's like, why not? And we see the birds flying away. Is it bad that I like this version of Ray? Is it bad that I like Toast Ray? So Ray is chatty and sociable. Okay. And Shinji is like, all like, I want to see her and meet her because I hope she's cute. And then Shinji just looking like a typical protagonist. She's like, I'm sorry, I was in a hurry. And then she's like, really sorry about that, bye. Shinji looks totally normal, like a normal kid that's not traumatized. And Asuka I still love that Asuka, despite this being an alternate reality, is still jealous and is like the jealous childhood friend. I kind of love it. And they're like, what are you, stupid? Like Asuka's desk. And so then he's with Toji and all of them. And he's like, just a little, why do I love Shinji being like normal? Like Shinji being like confident. And he's like, oh, I didn't see her panties, just like a little flash. I was like, oh, what? And Toji and Ida are just like, oh my god, seriously? He's like, you lucky bastard, and the day's just started. And then I love Hikari. Like Hikari's with Toji, right? But yeah, Shinji being confident. Shinji being confident and kind of sly. Like, what is this? And Asuka's just sitting there watching them, right? And then, yeah, she's like, what about you, Suzuhara? What kind of stupid talk is this to start the morning off with? Like, go change the water in the flower vase. And he's like, gets on to her. And Shinji talks about how Toji is so whipped. He's the type who's going to end up getting whipped. Yes, he is. Like, Shinji's very perceptive, right? And then Asuka says, well, so are you. And then Ida. When Ida was like saying that things are peaceful and we see the blue sky. Oh god, it's so great. And they're like arguing, like Shinji and Asuka are just bickering back and forth. And he's like, man, it's so peaceful. And then we see Masato showing up, like doing the same car flip thing. And they all get like out the window saying it's Miss Masato. And she shows up in the same outfit with the same pose. And they're all like, only this time Shinji doesn't seem embarrassed. Only this time Shinji's not embarrassed by her because he doesn't live with her. So that's something too. Shinji, he doesn't know the real Masato. So he doesn't have that embarrassed reaction by her. Because they don't live with her in this version. He only knows her from what they see at school and everything. Like, what? And for a second, part of me was like, as jarring as this alternate reality is, when you see the picture of the three of them, like, giving the peace sign to Masato, it almost made me go, okay, if this is how we're ending the series with this, like, happy ever after, I was like, so we're ending it happily ever after. Oh, okay. Funny that we got to this point, but I was like, no, it's fine. But he's like, what? They're all so dumb. And Hikari and Asuka say it at the same time, like they're in sync with one another. So Asuka and Hikari are totally in sync with one another and best friends. And then we have the idea that Masato is the one to present Rei as the exchange student, right? So she's like, rejoice, boys! Let me introduce you to the much rumored transfer student. But instead of Asuka, it's Rei. So instead of Asuka being the much rumored transfer student, it's Rei. And she says, I'm Rei Ayanami. Nice to meet you. And Shinji's so surprised. And she says, you're the panty peeker from this morning. And then she's like, that's not fair. And Asuka's like, you're the one that ran. You're the one who flashed them at Shinji. Like, they instantly have this animosity towards each other. And she's like, or are you two staying together since you defended him? And Asuka's like, we're just childhood friends, you annoying brat. And it's just like this typical, like, high school romance. And everybody's like, all about it. And Masato's like in the background. I love Masato's little drawing. I actually love the little drawing of Masato, like with her arms and legs crossed in the background, like with the little wink. It's actually freaking adorable, and I kind of love it. But then please continue. And what did that say? So we have like the beginning. Where is this? Yeah, I want to get a picture of Masato with that little winky face. It's actually really cute. But then we cut to this. It looks like a report card, maybe? Yeah, it's like a report card. I wish I could read Japanese because I can't see what this says. And something's circled. And they said off. Like, I don't know what this says. And then we see this is just another possible world. And we go back. We go back. At this point, when they said this is another possible world, I was like, oh, thank God, this is the A. As much as I love the AU and the idea that presents this, like, happy ending, I was like, but what about the world we've been in the last 25 episodes? What resolution do we have with that? And so I'm glad that we went back to the idea that this is one possible world. Right? This is just one possible world. The possibility that's in me. The me right now is not exactly who I am. There are all sorts of me that are possible. And I think that might actually be the thumbnail, is of him looking down at Tokyo 3 and seeing like the model of it with all that. So this is just the possibilities. The possibilities are within. Like, you can make the world like you want to be, right? I kind of love that. He's like, a me that's not an EVA pilot is possible too. So he doesn't have to be a pilot. Yeah, he doesn't have to be a pilot. You can see, it's kind of like a reverse It's a Wonderful Life, because in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey sees the world like what it would be like without him. And this isn't exactly it, but it's Shinji seeing what the world could be like if he was just in a different mindset, if he wasn't an EVA pilot. And we see that. And then we cut back to the stage, and I'm like, yes, we're back to this reality. When you or lack of reality in this case. When you think of it that way, this world of reality isn't so bad. Exactly. He's like, but I hate myself. So the reality doesn't have to be bad. It's you that perceives reality as bad, as unpleasant. So reality can be good. You don't have to hate yourself. You don't have to hate yourself. Right? You don't have to hate yourself. It's fine. So it's you who have mistaken reality for the truth. Your perspective on reality and the importance that you place on that reality, the slightest difference will greatly change the world inside your mind. Yeah. So the value that you give and confusing reality for truth, like that impacts a lot. That makes a huge difference, right? That doesn't have to be the case, right? There are many truths. There are as many truths as there are people, right? As many truths as people, like the lowercase truth, right? That, like, it's going to be different for everybody. There's only one truth for you, one made from your narrow perception of the world and the information that was altered to protect yourself. And from the information. So it's like there's one, and I love that Ida gives him this. There's one truth for you, and it's your narrow perception of the world. And in this line, from info that was altered to protect yourself, and that you alter info to protect yourself. Like you shut out, that's kind of like the big point here. You shut out people and things to protect yourself and to keep this one version of yourself like intact, right? A warped truth. One person's perception of the world's bound to be tiny anyway. I love the way that Shinji's drawn there. It's really good. Like I like that way that Shinji's drawn with Toji there. Yeah. It's like, it's a warped truth. I like that. Is a warped truth. Yeah. One person's perception's bound to be tiny. Like you can't, it's always going to be different, right? But people only have that tiny ruler to measure their surroundings with. Like yeah, your perception's always going to be narrow because it's only what you can possibly know, but everyone's in the same boat. They're all measuring reality with the same instrument. And you only try to see things through the truths that others have given you. Right, so you can only know what's been presented to you. Like everybody has a different experience and comes from a different background, and we all have experienced different people telling us different things, so our truths are kind of shaped from that, right? On sunny days, you feel good, and on rainy days, you feel down. Once you've been taught that, you make yourself believe that's how you should feel. So yeah, what you are taught, what you're taught impacts how you think, right? Like if you think that rain is depressing, then you'll feel sad when it rains. But even though pleasant things can happen on rainy days too. Yeah, that's the exact point. It's like, just because, you're taught that rain equals sadness, but that's not always true. It's kind of like how cultures view symbols differently. Like in Japanese culture or in some maybe Asian cultures, white may represent death. In a Western culture, it may represent like peace, or it can represent surrender, or it can represent marriage, which is something happy. So it's like they all have different representations based on what you've been taught. It's a delicate thing that can be completely transformed by how you perceive it. And I love that Fuyu-chan gives that. Yes. No, Gendo gives no advice to Shinji in this alternate world. None whatsoever. The truth within people, that is. And that's about how solid the truth is for humans. It's what makes people seek a deeper truth, right? So it's that fragile nature of it, and the fact that it is so different for everyone makes people seek a deeper truth. So it's like, yeah, we try to seek deeper answers because we know how deep the well is. It's like an iceberg theory. You know how deep it goes. And you want to find you're merely not used to being loved by other people. And that's when we see Gendo. You're just not used to being loved by your dad. Your dad sucks. So that's why you're just not used to being loved by other people. So there's no need for you to constantly care about what other people think about you. Exactly. And he's like, but doesn't everybody hate me? And they're like, no, what are you, stupid? You're just making yourself believe it. That's all. But I hate myself. And then Ray's like, anyone who hates himself cannot come to love and trust others. So that's why you feel that way. If you can't love yourself, why would you think anybody else loves you? He's like, I'm a gutless, hypocritical, wimpy coward. And they don't deny him in this. Masato's like, see, if you understand yourself, you can become kind. I'm like, they kind of don't deny him that he's a gutless, wimpy, hypocritical coward. But they like, if you understand yourself, you can move past it and be kind. And he's like, okay, all right. So he's like, but I hate myself. And so like, maybe I can learn to love myself. And that's when the stage starts to shatter. That you can learn to love yourself. That's been the whole goal of this whole series, is for Shinji to come to the fact that he can love himself, right? And I love, he's like, it's okay for me to be here. And he starts to smile, right? So it's okay. It's okay to exist. Yes! And then he starts to smile and everything starts to crack. And he's like, that's right, I'm me. Nothing more, nothing less. And he starts to crack. Yes, I'm me. I want to be me. And then we see his eyes raise up. That shot of him raising his eyes. I am me and want to be me. Like that's been like that shot of him like raising up the whole time has gone through the motions of him being depressed, of him being sad. But here it's like that acceptance of like, I am me. I can't change that, but I want to be here. And then he's like, I want to be here. And he like knocks over the chair and sits down. He wants to be here. He wants to be me and wants to be here. Shinji has moved from being a depressing, suicidal mess to accepting that he wants to exist in this world. It's okay for me to be here. I love the idea of, and it all just like fades away. I'm like, yes, please. And then everybody's clapping for him. But like, it's so beautiful. Like I love the shot of him like knocking the chair over and realizing that about himself. And my dog's like, where's my lunch, you winch? And so it's okay for me to be here. And then I love the idea of the stage melting away. It's very like Hayao Miyazaki kind of esque in a way. And then everybody's there applauding, except for Gendo and Yui. Gendo and Yui aren't applauding him. Fuyu-chan is applauding, Maya and Rei, Kaji, Ida, Toji, Hikari, Hyuga, Alba. Everybody's there applauding except Gendo and Yui, but they are standing next to each other. And that's when they're like, congratulations. They're like, you did it, Shinji. And everybody's clapping for him. Like a standing ovation at the end. Except for Gendo and Yui. And he's like, what? And they're like, congratulations. And they all say it to him. At the very end, it's like all of his friends all say it to him. And Pin's even there. And like, even the ones that don't clap, like they all tell him that. And then at the very end, there's Yui and Gendo side by side. And they tell him, congratulations. And then Shinji says, thank you. Like, I'm glad I've come to this realization about myself. And he says, to my father, thank you. To my mother, farewell. And to all the children, congratulations. And that's where it ends. On the one hand, I'm very glad that Shinji has finally come to accept himself. He's gotten out of a pit of despair and depression and has realized that he does not, in fact, need that to survive. I'm very happy for Shinji. I'm glad he's come to that realization. So that's good. That's great. I'm glad he's made it. I'm glad he's made it. It's wonderful. Good on you, Shinji. But on the other hand, there are lots of questions that still don't have answers. So I'm kind of floored that it just ended like that. And it feels so weird because on the one hand, ever since like episode 16, I've been like, okay, Shinji is in a dark place. He's been in a dark place this entire time, but he's in a dark place. So I'm like, will this series be about Shinji moving past and coming to accept himself and realizing he doesn't, and finding a psychological place of peace? And I feel like I'm happy that 25 and 26 got Shinji to that place. I'm glad we spent those 2 episodes like going through an entire psychological breakdown of an entire existential crisis and having Shinji come out on the other side okay, well balanced, warm and caring. I'm glad we got Shinji to that point. I'm glad. But then on the other hand, what do we do about the rest of the show? So we've solved one aspect of the problem, but we still have like the rest of the series. So I'm like, did they all just become primordial soup and that's it? Because this episode suggests that the primordial soup is a bad thing. And so I feel like Shinji realizing that he doesn't need to just be in the primordial soup, that he can be himself. I kept wanting, like, there has to be more to it. I kept being like, well, this is the lead up to the climax. You know, when your character's at their lowest point and then it builds up to that moment of self-actualization and realization of what they've got to do. This was like that build-up. Like the Rocky music is playing and you're like, okay, Shinji, you realize that you have the right to exist in this world. You don't need Gendo. You don't need all this other stuff. You are you. All right, now go do something. And then the show's just like, okay, bye. It's like this big build-up. And you think something is going to happen now. And then it's over. And you're like, but what about the rest of the story? What about Shinji and the Instrumentality Project and Gendo and Rei and Asuka? What about all them? How does Masato die? What? But aren't you going to explain? And so I'm really crossing my fingers that End of Evangelion maybe picks up where this left. I think it'll pick up where this left off at. Yes, it'll pick up where it left off at. That's my hope. Is that Anno ran out of time. I don't want spoilers, but my theory going into End of Evangelion is that they ran out of time, and this is where Anno's like, okay, I'm going to stop the story here, and End of Evangelion is going to pick up where this left off at, and from there, we're going to find out the aftermath and what happened. What Shinji's got the tools that he needs now to move forward. So what do we do with it? That's my hope anyway. That's my hope. So yeah. So that's my hope. That's what I'm hoping is going to happen with him in this. We'll find out. But I think that I am going to watch Death as like a recap of everything, and I might record myself watching it and just talking over it, and that'll be like our recap of everything, because I've had a lot of people have asked me to go back and rewatch the series, and I'm like, that's going to take an insane amount of time, but maybe I can view Death as like a way to just rewatch it and like kind of like refresh my mind on the course of everything before diving into End of Evangelion, and then from there I can watch End of Evangelion and do that. So no spoilers, please. No hints or clues, but it's fine. This was a great stopping point before End of Evangelion. Sure it was. Oh God, I just got through that entire discussion. An entire like 2.5 hour discussion, and then I went to like close out the video and I was like, oh shit, I didn't even react to the Shinji rant. So sorry, Dark Warwolf, we're gonna go back to that. So before we actually leave, I'm gonna go back and watch that. So thank you for sending this to me, but let's watch this. So we're gonna look at this Shinji rant at the end of episode 26, and we're gonna do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's see what this is about.
Oh, this is nice. This is the end. Okay. Where exactly am I? Here's the song. Oh, good. There's some things that are still unresolved here, guys. How do I get home? What do I eat? Was Rei my mom? Or a clone? Or hell, was this all in my mind? What's an Ava? Is that sort of a Freudian thing? Or, am I real? Oh, hell, does the bus run through here? I mean, I'd like to go home now, but, oh, God, where's home? Okay. I mustn't run away. Okay, I got that. Good, okay. Now, if I were to run away, let's analyze that. Where the fuck would I go? I'm on a big blue ball. Is this how you end the series? I mean, is this where we go from here? Okay, the movie better sure as hell make up for this. I'm telling you right now, because I'm stuck in nowhere land. You ran out of ink too, didn't you bastards?
Yes, please. Oh, yeah. So let's hope that the movie has some answers, and we'll see. But I my brain's kind of broken. But I feel like after going through this discussion, it feels a little bit put back together. So I'll take this week to kind of like refresh myself and kind of brace myself for End of Evangelion. I'll wait till I hear the comments for episodes 26 on Patreon, episodes 25 on YouTube, and then tie that into going into the final episode to Death and then End of Evangelion. So yeah. That's the plan anyway. So I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below, what you all thought of this. But it's a very bittersweet pause before End of Evangelion. But I don't feel mad about it. I don't feel upset. I don't feel like oh, what a weird ending, because I know End of Evangelion is next. Now, come back to me at the end of Evangelion, and I might think something different, but we'll see, right? My hope is that Shinji, we kick off End of Evangelion, Shinji's in this great place, he knows what he's got to do, and he's going to get out of the primordial soup and fight Gendo and save the day. That's what you think's going to happen, but whether or not that actually happens, I don't know. I just want those questions on the other side of Whiteboard Coon to get answered. But again, I don't know. So in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back very soon with Death and the End of Evangelion. Bye.